So welcome back, YouTube. We're going to be doing our very last set review for Kaldheim Limited today. Today we're going to be checking out multicolor. No, we did multicolor. Colorless artifacts, modals, and lands is all we have got left. So Yanks is back. We're going to check them all out, rate them all 1 to 5, and you guys will have links to articles and all of that jazz in the last video. So let's go ahead and get it started. First is artifacts, guys. We have Bloodline, shapeshifter for 2, or it's a 2/2 for 3 shapeshifter. It's really interesting. I think that's pretty good stats already. A 3/3 colorless for a 2/2 changeling is going to trigger a lot of things. The rest of its text says choose a creature type, and whenever you cast a card of the chosen creature type, then you put a +1/+1 counter on this card, so it just gets bigger over time. You only really need to trigger it one time to get vanilla stats, which is 3/3 for 3, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked in all the different colors, right? How a 3-mana 2/2 on its own would be underrated, but the fact that it's colorless, so you can play it in any deck, and it's easy to cast, the changeling ability, and then you're right. Once you get it to 3/3, you're almost kind of above rate. We've been saying, a
Yes.
3-mana 3/2 is kind of a 2, right on par as filler.
And
So
it's
you trigger this
colorless.
once, and
So,
it's colorless.
so it doesn't matter what your opening draw is. So I think that is, again, above rate. Unless it's a green card. You'll usually see 3-mana 3/3s that are just vanilla. Yep. That's about average for green. But for the most part, yeah, filler. Now that's not to say that doesn't include changeling, which is also a nice little bonus, right?
Yeah, well, I think without changeling, this card would go way down, just because it makes it fit in every deck for the rest of the text on the card, because you could put it in a deck with 7 wizards or 5 giants or 9 elves. Like, it doesn't, it goes in any sort of tribal synergy and triggers off of any other changelings you have.
Well, I still think it would be very good, even if it itself wasn't, because it still goes into any deck. You could say that this was, an alien or whatever. It would still go in the vampires and the elves deck and the whatever deck, because they would trigger off of theirs. It's nice that this will also trigger any other mechanics that you have that trigger creature type bonuses, but you might not have any. So I don't know that I think that this wouldn't fit in those decks.
True. I think it makes it a lot better. I think you need all of these abilities to make up for being, underrated 3-mana 2/2. And you're right. The fact that you can pick any type means it would fit in any of those decks. But the fact that it also gets the other bonuses for being a changeling itself is nice.
Yes, if you have any.
If you have any, yep.
So I like this card a fair amount. Like I said, it is 1 more mana, but you really only need to trigger it 1 time, which won't be hard. Even if you don't have a synergistic deck, you can just name whatever creature you have in your hand, and you're basically getting like filler plus, which is, at the 2.5 range. The changeling itself helps with other mechanics as well. It's colorless, easy to cast. I'm in that 3 to 3.5 range. What are you thinking?
I think I like it at 3. I think the one downside to this card is, right, it's a pretty terrible top deck at the end of the game. Because then you're just getting a 3-mana 2/2, and you have to hope that your other top decks work with it, and you're guessing on what creature type to pick. It's not like you have one in hand to choose. So, that being said, anytime earlier in the game, I'm happy with it. So I like it at a 3.
I think changelings are going to be really, really valuable. There's a ton of cards, even if they're just small abilities, commons and uncommons, that want other things to happen, like a ton of really powerful giant synergies. There's a red removal spell at common that says if you control a giant, you can deal 6 damage at instant speed for 2, which is just absolutely nuts. That's at common, right?
Yeah, the fact that specifically for giants, the fact that this is a cheap giant, which is just not something you see very often, is really nice.
I just mean that like every single archetype has something that this is going to be very, very powerful with. I think changeling is going to be or shapeshifter is going to be nuts.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. It has to be, the abilities have to be pretty good for us to be calling a 3-mana 2/2 a 3. So I think they are.
We've got a Colossal Plow.
Yeah, so Colossal Plow is a 2-mana vehicle. It's a 6/3. Whenever Colossal Plow attacks, add white, and you gain 3 life. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. And it has Crew 6, which is great flavor with the 06 Ox that you can have pull your plow, because it crews with the 6 toughness on that card we saw when we did white.
It is an ox that pulls a plow. I would have not made that connection, but I like that. Okay. Crew 6 is quite expensive without having an Ox in your deck, which I don't want to have.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a flavor win, but as a card, it's kind of a fail. It's just, it's cute, but I can't see playing this card. It's just Crew 6 is so much. It's not like, the 6/3 is easily dealt with. You just need a 3/3 to block it. It doesn't have trample or any sort of evasion. Adding the mana is nice, but by the time you get to Crew 6, you've probably got a decent amount of mana already.
Yeah, it's a 6/3 that doesn't really have any other abilities. It has got no evasion,
Yeah.
so it trades really easy. So most likely you're going to be turning 2 3/3s to activate this, and they just trade with their 3/2 or whatever. That doesn't make much sense to me. Again, without this having any evasion or any other thing to help it go through, seems sketchy.
Yeah, I think this card is pretty much unplayable. I have it a 1. I might try to play it with the Ox just for the memes at some point, but other than that, no.
I was actually going to say that if this was at common rate, it would be a fun deck to just make a deck of these with Oxen.
Yeah.
I could definitely see doing something like that. But yeah, I'm not a huge fan of it.
We just have to make sure nobody comes in the night and steals all our Oxen along with, clothes and bullets and pounds of food.
Yeah, it's so weird when they take like all of the clothes and like I know I couldn't have been sleeping naked, right? Cosmos Elixir, guys, 4 mana artifact at the beginning of your end step. So this triggers the turn you have it, which is kind of always nice, right? Draw a card if your life total is greater than your starting life total. Otherwise, you gain 2 life. So works really well with life gain decks, right? But a lot of the life gain payoffs themselves are rare or mythic. So the chances that you have this and those seems a little less likely. Now that said, this will probably get passed around a bit, so you could potentially pick this up kind of late in those decks, but on its own it doesn't do enough, I think.
I agree. I think this card would have been really nice in the last set where you had the white-black life gain deck was really supported. It was, kind of not dirtily, but it was grindy, so the incremental advantage you would get from this card would be pretty key, but we saw some good life gain synergy in white, but we didn't see a ton outside of white. Like the second color didn't seem really there for it. So I just don't think there's enough support in this set. Plus the sets seem pretty aggressive.
I do agree with that. There wasn't a ton of other support in the other colors. We had like a 3/1 black life linking vampire zombie thing. Yep. But that's super easy to kill, destroy. It's not going to get a ton of extra value. And there was the black enchantment that drains for 1, which is, not nothing. That's definitely something that would fit very well in that archetype. So I still say it's an Orzhov life gain deck theme, but it's very, very skewed towards one side as far as the payoffs and the triggers to make that work.
Yeah, this is also a card I think would be a little bit better in sealed. Now, you're not going to get the life gain synergies as often, but just the games tend to be a little more grindy. So you might be able to eke out some more incremental value if you get a board stall out of this, but I'm still not thrilled with it even in there.
Yeah, I would say one of the things that you might consider is even if you don't have a life gain payoff, if your deck is set up to be very stally, a lot of 1/4s. I know blue has had a lot of like big butts. We saw like the 1/4 bird for 3. They have a couple of giants, like a 2/5 for 4, which is really good. So you might not care about the actual life gain itself, but if your deck is set up to survive and not take a ton of damage early, then if you play this on turn 4 or 5, after 1 or 2 triggers, maybe only 1 trigger, you can then begin to draw cards, which is a big, big deal. So you might be looking at this more as a way to increase your draws.
Yeah, agreed. I think we're probably mostly in agreement though that this card is just probably doesn't do enough on its own to really make it worth a high pick. If you end up with a ton of those life game synergies in your draft deck, you'll probably get this coming around late. You'll be happy about it.
Yeah, so it's good in exactly just the life gain deck, and I think it is decent in just the big butts deck. And even then, it's like you can probably find other things that are more consistent, like just a divination type spell, whatever that was in the set, would probably just be better.
And we've noted in this set that the 4-drop slot seems pretty clogged as well.
It is. I didn't even really consider that as far as mana cost. It's high, but yeah, you're right. The mana cost here is very, very 4 oriented. So I think it's a 2. It's something you're not going to want to play in most decks, but if you've got the room, it's not unplayable.
Yeah, I think I'm a little lower. I think I have it at 1.5, but it probably will show up in some decks every once in a while.
All right, we got a Funeral Longboat, guys. It's a 2 mana cost of Vigilance 3/3 with crew 1. Now, this actually seems pretty decent.
Yeah, this card is the exact opposite of the Plow, right? It's the same mana cost, but 3/3 for 2 mana. Okay, but Vigilance crew 1. I mean, anything can crew this card pretty much.
Not an Oxen. Oh, I guess
It can.
technically it can. For some reason I was thinking that the plow is what gave the ability to use its
Oh,
butt.
yeah.
I was getting it backwards in my head.
Yeah, it's a common.
I'm a little confused as to why the creature doesn't die that crews it at the end step, because if the boat's on fire, they should definitely be dead.
I know I'm looking further down the artifacts to see if there's some sort of bow with flaming arrows or something to go with this, but I haven't seen one yet.
I feel like this longboat is that's the whole tradition, right? You send it out and then you burn it. So it should be crew 1, creature dies EOT.
Yeah, or the it wouldn't have vigilance, but like when it attacks at the end of combat, sacrifice it because it burns down. Like,
I mean, neither of these things would be as good as this card. But
no, not at all.
But it would be a ton more flavorful. I like this card. I think it's pretty decent. I'm pretty happy to run this. There's a lot of 1/1s in the formats. There's a ton of cards that replace itself with 1/1 soldiers, a few spirits. So you're going to be able to crew this really, really easily. It's only 2 mana. It's great to fill your curve. I'm in that 3 to 3/5 range.
Yeah, I think I'm right around 3 as well. Vehicles, always have a drawback that you can't have too many of them in your deck versus the number of creatures you have because they work at cross purposes. But this is one you'll want.
There's less, from what I've seen, there's less vehicles that I'm interested in playing, so I just don't feel that you will have too many, as opposed to other sets where we've seen vehicles where they jam in like 70 of them and most of them are trash, but you can definitely add up with too many. This one, there's only like 4 or 5, right?
Agreed. This is not Kaladesh where they were all over the place.
Still don't know how the creature survives, but whatever. Gold Vein Pickaxe, guys. It is equipped creature gets +1/+1 whenever the equipped creature deals combat damage to a player. Create a treasure token.
Yeah, this is kind of a low impact equipment, but it's efficient, right? Only costs 2 to play, only 1 to equip, which is key. You get 1 hit in, you get that 1 mana back from a treasure token. I don't mind this card. I'm not thrilled to play it, but I could see running this in especially an aggressive deck.
I could see this as a late game pickup too if you're not in any color that helps you splash and you just happen to open a big bomb. This could be a late pickup that helps you figure that out as well. It could be really nice with double strike, with flyers. I don't know. You can make your invincible squirrel slightly more scary.
Yeah, and admittedly, as much as I've been down on the rune cycle in this is a good card to put a rune on, like especially the flying one.
Yeah, I thought that there was the red enchantment as well, which is pretty good for the rune cycle, because they have 1 mana equips, so you're getting a ton of value out of that rune.
Yeah. If you can reliably get this in and create a couple treasure tokens, you'll get your mana back. You'll help fix your colors or splash, like you're saying. There's a lot of potential upside for pretty low investment here.
Low investment, but it's still an investment of an entire card, which I'm not a fan of, so I'm probably a bit lower on this than you are.
Oh, by no means am I super high on this card. I think this is like between a 2 and a 2/5. I just think the bar and equipment is pretty high to clear, and I think this actually does it. I'll actually be willing to play it.
Okay, so I'm like 1.5, 2. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I could see us being right around a 2 between us on this card.
All right, your turn.
All right, next up is Maskwood Nexus. This is a 4 mana artifact at rare. Creatures you control are every creature type. The same is true for creature spells you control and creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield. And you can pay 3 and tap it to create a 2/2 blue shapeshifter creature token with Changeling. So essentially, any creature card in your deck or creature spell on the stack has Changeling, or on the battlefield.
Interesting.
And you can make changelings.
It doesn't include graveyard though, because there is some graveyard synergies for getting back things.
It does. Creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield.
That aren't on the battlefield. Okay, I missed that last bit. Okay.
So everything that started in your deck at the beginning of the game.
So that's insane for anything that wants some synergy.
Yeah, I think this card is really, really strong. you get everything that's a creature already in your deck starts triggering any sort of synergies you have. It allows you to start playing, giants or wizards or elves with fewer specific synergistic cards in your deck, because this turns them all into them if you get it into the battlefield. And it's just over time creates advantage by letting you spend 3 mana at instant speed to just start making 2/2s. It's not particularly efficient, but it does so much.
Yeah. Sorry, trying to get in a little bit. 3 mana sinks late game for a 2/2 body is really, really nice. Definitely a big fan of that. Flavor on the card's really cool. There is honestly nothing to like about this card, and there's so many creature type synergies that the average deck isn't going to be able to take advantage of all the ones it has, but there are just so many creature cards that have these fringe benefits for having a ton of creature types. So even if it's just a good card on its own, you might not be able to support it. This is still an option, which I really do like.
Yeah, I agree. Every deck is going to want this card.
Yeah, it's colorless, so there's no reason not to play a token generator. I like free bears. Now they make blue shapeshifters themselves, so there's like the black card that almost drains for creature types that come in. There's flicker cards that put counters on everything of the same creature type. There's just a ton of synergy all over the place with this set, and this makes this really good. What are you thinking score-wise?
I think this is a 3/5. I could be talked into a 4, but it is slow. Is the only reason I don't have it higher.
So I think it's a 3/5 with a big ceiling, personally.
Okay. Yep.
Not huge because, like you said, it is slow. But if these creatures that this produces is getting triggers off of anything else, then you're going to be in a really, really good spot.
This is also a card I probably would rate at least that half point higher in sealed.
Yes, I can agree with that.
Because of that 3 mana repeated 2/2 generation is probably even better in sealed than it is in draft.
All right, Pyre of Hopes. Sacrifice a creature. Search your library for a creature card that shares a creature type with a sacrificed creature and has converted mana cost equal to 1 plus the creature's converted mana cost. Put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Activate this anytime you could activate a sorcery. So it has to be, it doesn't say 1 or less, right? It has to be exactly equal to 1 plus. So it's very specific, feels a lot more constructed to me.
Yeah, this is the ability on this, unless I'm missing something, is exactly Birthing Pod. Minus the ability to pay Phyrexian mana for it. This is a kind of card you want to find a way to create a draft deck for, just for like an achievement, but you have to have such a perfectly set up mana curve for that to work that you're just not going to play this in limited 99.9% of the time.
It's just a really slow process to upgrade your creatures, and you're upgrading them for 1, and I feel like that's just not a good enough ability for sure.
Yeah, it's just a 1. But interesting card, and like you said, we'll see some constructed play probably.
I think so.
Next up is Raider's Carve. It is a 3 mana 4/4 vehicle. Whenever it attacks, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield tapped, and it has crew 3.
Someone's pointing out that the creature type has to for the last card has to share a creature type, which makes it worse than pod.
That's what I missed. Yep, that's I would have been surprised if they printed a card with the exact text of Birthing Pod. So yeah, I'm not surprised I missed something there.
Not a constructed player, so I definitely know what Birthing Pod does, but I would have not, paid enough attention to all of the exact bits.
The extent I knew about what Birthing Pod did was kill it when it shows up.
Or when I play constructed, I'm just like, if I don't exactly know what it does or how it wins, then I kill it. That's the plan.
Also works.
3 mana 4/4 crew 3. When it attacks, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield tap, not even into your hand. That's kind of spicy. This is not unplayable.
No. Crew, I generally like to see crew 1 and 2, but you're getting a 4/4 at crew 3 with an ability that even if it trades, you might get some incremental advantage out of it. At minimum, you get the information of what's on top of your deck.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to hit too many times for it to be considered like, each time it hits, it's a free draw essentially. Even if you don't value the knowledge all that much, because it's not super relevant in limited. It always helps, but there are a few times where it makes a difference, right? Where knowing that would have changed something compared to constructed anyway. So
Agreed.
I'm more interested in just the 1 out of 4, 1 out of 3 times that this is going to hit and basically draw a free card and get a land off the top of my deck for me, so that way I don't have to worry about drawing it.
Yeah, in your standard 17 land deck, if you have this out on turn 3 and attacking with it on turn 4, you've probably got 4 lands on the battlefield and 13 left in your deck, and you're 10 to 11 cards in, so you're probably about a 1 in 3 shot of hitting, or a little better than that, between 1 and 2 and 1 and 3.
Yeah. It depends if you have any other ways to search out your lands too. Also,
Yeah.
a lot of decks are sometimes play shorter. Best of one will sometimes play a little shorter because the hand fixing on Arena. But yeah, I like the card well enough. I mean, I'm not thrilled, but I think it's like a 2/5.
Yep, 2/5 is where I've got it.
All right, moving right along. Raven Wings. It's a 2 mana equipment. We've seen a lot of equipment in the set. Creature gets +1/+0 in flying and is a bird in addition to other types. So that seems I haven't seen any bird synergies, have you?
No, I can't think of any.
So not
No.
quite sure what that's all about, but the equip cost isn't too expensive. I mean, I typically see these flying things and you don't play them, but there is a couple of them. You're right. We see them in a couple of sets. There's like I'm at a loss for what the last one was called, but that's probably because I didn't play it very often.
Yeah, these type of cards I rarely play. They just don't seem to do enough to justify the full card often enough. This does allow you to put it on a creature and say things like "Great Odin's Raven," which is worth a little bit, I guess.
You say that?
Just an Anchorman quote.
It has been many years since I've seen Anchorman. I don't remember that quote.
It's just one of the random things Ron Burgundy would say, like his I can't talk, exclamations. Great Odin's Raven.
I don't remember that. It has been like 10 something years, so definitely not a huge fan of it, guys. If you've got cards that have synergies that want to do damage to opponents, which we have seen a few, like our magical squirrel, right, that wants to deal damage and draw cards to opponents. Deal damage to opponents and draw cards, don't mind me. Something like that could be in consideration if you feel that the, ability is strong enough and you have a lack of playables. I think that would be the culmination of things that would bring this into your deck, but that's kind of it. So I'm putting it at a 1/1/5. Definitely not a huge fan. It's not terrible value as far as equipments go, but I just don't know that that I want to spend a whole card on it.
Yeah, I've got it right around a 1/5. Not unplayable, but definitely unhappy with it.
Definitely.
Okay, we have Replicating Ring. There's a 3 mana snow artifact. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you put a night counter on Replicating Ring. Then, if it has 8 or more night counters on it, remove all of them and create 8 colorless snow artifact tokens named Replicated Ring with tap, add 1 mana of any color.
Interesting. Okay, so it's a 3 mana fixer that makes any color, which is kind of nice.
And more importantly, makes any color of snow mana, since it's a snow artifact.
Yes, so it does say add. I don't know if it makes. Does it make snow mana though? It doesn't say.
Any mana created by a source with the super type snow is snow mana.
Okay, so I wouldn't have read that actually. I did not know that. I knew it counted as a snow permanent to trigger some of your other things, but usually I thought you needed something that specified. So that's interesting to know. So Yeah, it's not bad for fixing. It's 3 mana to make any color, a bit of ramp if you need it. I'm not usually a huge fan of ramp spells that are on 3, unless you can like sack them and draw cards like we've seen with some of the previous sets. They've got some really nice like backup abilities on them. But it does have this other ability where you get like a ton of other mana after a bunch of turns, and you can just like float it if need be. But there's no fireball or anything cute, no kickers to really want like a crap ton of mana, so that's also not all that relevant. So this is mostly just like a snow fixer, it sounds like.
Yeah, I basically view that whole second paragraph as kind of trinket text. It's cool if it comes up, and maybe every once in a while you'll get all sorts of spells off with all the extra mana, but really, yeah, it's just a 3 mana snow fixer. And we've played things like Manalith, which are just 3 mana regular fixers before, but we're generally never happy with it unless there's a specific reason, like you're talking a deck that's like a 4 or 5 color deck. But I do think some of the snow decks will definitely want this card.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there was some in the previous, what are they called? Lockets? The lockets were not a bad rotation because they could fix you, ramp you, and then when you no longer needed them, redraw themselves, which I thought was really nice. But yeah, this is a little bit slow for my tastes unless I, have good stuff to splash, or there are some things that count your snow permanents on board, and this is just a really nice way to get that out there because, it counts for a snow permanent, plus it will create the mana to make that happen. And it's only an uncommon. I don't think it's great. Most decks aren't going to want it, but it's good in the right decks.
Yeah, I think this is a 2 with some upside for the snow decks.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's a 1 or a 2/5 in the snow decks. Most decks I don't think are going to want it.
Yep.
Or in the splashing deck. Even if you don't have snow, you just want to splash something, it's fine if you don't have a ton of other fixers. All right, Runed Crown. When Runed Crown enters the battlefield, you may search your library, hand, or graveyard for a rune card, put it into the battlefield attached to the crown. If you do, search your library this way, shuffle it, enchant. Equipped creature gets +1/+1. So it's going to be basically getting +1/+1 plus whatever the rune ability is. I believe the rune abilities don't need to be cast. You just put them into play and draw the card, so it's kind of nice. So yeah, you're getting a fair amount of value off of this crown. It also is a 2 equip cost, and I would go so far as to say you're not playing this unless you have enough runes to make it work. So you're paying 3 mana and 2 equip for basically, let's say, what's the average, rune +1/+1 probably. Because there's like 1 and 0 haste, and then there's 1/1 in death touch. There's 1/1 in flying, or 0/1 in flying, something like that.
Yeah, a few of them don't give any bonus.
There's one that's just straight lifelink.
I think white is just straight lifelink, blue is just straight flying. Black is straight death touch. I think it's just the red and green ones that give boosts.
Okay. I thought they all had like kind of a small something, but
No, red is +1/+0 in haste.
Plus that itself draws another card, right, when it comes into play. So you're replacing even the card that you get out of your deck for free. That seems like actually a fair amount of value.
Yeah, I think this is a decent deal if you've got a couple runes in your deck. Like you said, it's unplayable without them. But if you've got 2 runes in your deck, I'd consider running this because it is a decent amount of value there.
Nintendo's informing us that we will also get to draw off of the rune when it enters, in case you guys missed that. Yeah, I think that it all adds up to be enough. My question is that the rune is also an uncommon cycle, right?
Yes.
So now you're looking for an uncommon equipment paired with at least 3 runes, because you don't want to be drawing this and not having a rune to find with it. I don't know if I'd even risk it with 2. Oh no.
Yeah, Yep, good.
It says graveyard, right?
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So you can't not have something. I guess the worst case scenario is it's in your hand, and you get to save the mana, but not.
Yes, graveyard is fine.
So yeah, I think I'm okay to play this with 2 runes in my deck, but you're right. I want 3, and now you're talking 4 uncommons.
Yeah. Now that I re-looked at it and it does say graveyard, I remembered that after I said it. I'm actually more fine with 2. And then I'll just be a little bit more liberal on when I play them on my creature. knowing that this is going to come out. I think that's actually almost better than getting it out of your graveyard, because then you get that, ability off of it twice, which is actually really nice.
Agreed.
And you probably ate a good removal for it, because people tend to dump removal on things that have auras on it because it's just better value. I like it.
Yeah, I think this, it's a 1 if you don't have those runes. I still don't think your ceiling's very high. I think it's like a 2.5.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it's a 1 unless you have the rune deck, and then I'm not excited about the rune deck, but in the rune deck, this is one of the best cards you're gonna have, I think, in that format. So I'm in the same boat. I think it's a 3 tops in the best of rune decks.
Yeah, that makes sense.
3 mana, 3/2, perfect for vanilla stats. Foretell, you can just cast it for cheaper and trigger Foretell. So what?
Yeah, I mean, everybody always likes to see something with those 0 in it. It just kind of is like a mystical thing on a card when you can play it for free.
So is this just a 2 mana 3/2?
Yeah, you get a 2 mana 2/3, but that you can't play on turn 2. That you have to pay 2, and then you have to pay the 0 the next turn. Great for the 2 spell a turn deck.
I don't get it. Why can't you pay 0 that turn?
That's Foretell's rules. It says cast it on a later turn.
Oh, it does say cast on a later turn. I don't know if I ever paid it. I think when I first read that, I always assumed you'd be doing it to lower the mana cost, making it happen a later turn. So then my brain just disregarded that piece of information, because it never came up. It would never be relevant where you're going to want to do both of them in the same turn.
Yeah, it's very rare where that's actually a relevant part of the rule, but in this case it is.
That happens a lot in Limited with cards that have pieces of text that are really only relevant to Constructed, and then I will read it the first time and then just be like, oh, cool. And then at some point that text will just kind of disappear in my brain. Like the Black Saga kills creatures or planeswalkers.
Yep.
And so I would just play it for creatures over and over again, and then I went and played like Dominaria when it came back for the flashback drafts, and played the card, and everybody's like, why aren't you killing their planeswalker? I'm like, what? They have no creatures on board. I can't kill anything. They're like, you could kill their planeswalker. And I'm like,
oh, it does say.
Silly, useless text that doesn't come into play very often. I could see it in a constructed deck too, because you could have like the Foretell triggers and you get a bunch of cheap ones together, and then you're like triggering your Foretell stuff.
Yeah. I think it's good. It's good if you have Foretell synergy. It's good if you have 2 spells a turn synergy, obviously, because you get 1 for free.
Yeah.
Being said, it's still just a 2/3. It's still a vanilla 2/3. So I'm playing this because it's undercosted, but it's a 2.5.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely undercosted. If you want, you can play it on 3. I'm still close to the 2, just because like the Scarecrow synergy doesn't do anything for me.
Yeah, true.
It is, like you said, a little bit undercosted, but I feel like the set is a little bit more based around synergy than we've seen in the past, so it's just a little underwhelming to me. It might overperform.
Yeah, it's right in that range.
Weathered Runestone. We have a 2 mana non-land permanent cards in graveyards and libraries can't enter the battlefield. Players can't cast spells from graveyards or libraries. Sideboard card, but even then I don't know if it's worth siding in for the 1 or 2 abilities you might find your opponent with.
Yeah, this is a constructed sideboard plant.
100% constructed.
We see cards like this every once in a while that are just meant to be in sideboards, like in Modern or Pioneer, Historic, something like that, where you have to deal with a lot of graveyards and dredge and all that sort of thing. It's just not really relevant for Limited. It's just a 1.
Yeah, there's a couple of cards. A lot of them don't even get cast from your graveyard, so be careful on that. If it says like, 1 or 2 creatures, put them into play, then they're not being cast from the graveyard. So that, even if you do try to do something cute, I would be careful, because this is not going to count on a lot of those spells.
The first part, if it's a creature or something, the first part would apply to that, because they can't enter from the graveyard.
Yes, but if you can get like
But
spells back or
if
anything,
you have a
then
spell, absolutely, yes. A spell, there's the one that for giants, if you have a giant, you can play again from your graveyard.
the one that looks at the top 4 and gets you a card off of them.
Yeah, yeah. There's definitely ways around this that sometimes you don't think about.
Real quick, guys, we're getting a really big raid. Welcome, welcome. What were you guys up to? Thank you so much, Marshall. Really appreciate the host, guys. We are finishing up our limited set review. I know Marshall does a ton of that stuff. I know you guys have seen those. But if you guys happen to miss his, here is ours. I hope you guys stick around and check it out. We're just finishing up with artifacts. We've got modals and lands left, and that's about it.
I believe, if I saw correctly earlier, Marshall was doing the Tinkerer's Cube on Arena.
Yeah, drafting cube is what people are telling us here in chat. Okay, so guys, we're done with the artifacts. We're gonna go ahead and move on to lands, and I just saved them all in the alphabetical order that was on the wizard site. But you know, most of them are gonna be pretty straightforward because they're just different variations of each other. So we've got the Boros enters the battlefield tapped. Now it's the common land, so it's not going to do anything else, but it is definitely a fixer. I like that this set is a little bit more splashy than some of the ones we've seen in the last couple of rotations.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Two key things to note about this cycle, and there's 10 of them, is first, it's a snow land. So it does work for snow. And the way these are going to appear in packs is every pack will have either a snow basic or one of these in the land slot.
Yes.
So this will not take the place of a regular common. So there won't be multiples in the pack, barring foils, but there will be one in every pack, either of these duals or a common snowland, basic snowlands.
This also means that having these in the pack isn't actually increasing the amount of snowlands at the table. You, if you're drafting, you're still going to have the same amount. If you're playing sealed, you'll still have the same amount. But the splashing, or these being 2-color lands, makes it so that way if you are in the snow deck, and let's say, you know, in this Alpine Meadow, you're not actually playing white, you might just want to play it for, you know, a tapped snow red.
Absolutely. You will definitely see people playing these for one half of the land, just for the snow ability. Also, just kind of an interesting note that a lot of people, especially newer players, might not realize is that also going to make these draft packs 15 card packs instead of 14 like you've seen recently.
That makes sense considering the basic is counted.
Is draftable. Yeah.
Boros,
what do you think for this cycle? Because we're going to see these over and over again.
What was that?
What do we want to give this cycle of lands? Because they're probably, I assume we're going to give all 10 of them the same.
Yeah, most likely. I was just going through and checking out which ones we've got. Oh, but it looks like they're in alphabetical order. So
yeah.
But we can tell basically which ones are in the cycle. I like splash lands. I always think that, you know, they're pretty underdrafted, especially by newer players. At the beginning, it's weird. At the beginning of every set, they're underdrafted, and then streamers start putting out, or content creators of any kind start putting out their, you know, their winning decks, and there's a ton of them, and then we write a bunch of articles telling about how they're underdrafted, and then they become overdrafted very, very quickly, and then it's like when the new set comes out, everybody forgets that the lands are still good and that you should be drafting them, because then they become underdrafted again all of a sudden. So it's just a really weird cycle, I think, that fixing is either insanely easy to get or next to impossible to get. So I don't know. I like a lot of the cards in the set. I think the black and red removal are often very easy. The Foretell often takes away the double pipped cards, making more cards better for splashing. So I'm pretty high on these. I'm always excited to splash things.
Yeah, I also think these are going to be even higher picks in best of 1 draft because you don't have to worry about taking cards for your sideboard that you do in best of 3. So it's easier to, you know, pick up a land here and there instead of something that, you know, is the 23rd card or maybe a sideboard card. I'm just going to grab these in best of 1.
Yes. Instead of taking any like the enchantment or artifact removal, you can spec on these. And if you happen to, you know, pack 3 a bomb, then you are more likely to be able to play it versus a sideboard card that you know is never going to come into your deck because you're just not going to mainboard it. So definitely like that better as a spec pick than anything else that you might be picking up normally. I'm in the 2/5 range. I mean, I'm not taking it over like a good creature or any removal, but it's definitely going to be better than a third of the creatures in my deck, probably.
Yeah, I think I'm generally in the 2/5 range. I think that the Alpine Meadow is actually the worst of the cycle just because the snow cards have been focused in Sultai, and that doesn't produce either color.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And ones that are the Sultai double colors are going to be slightly higher valued, because they'll produce 2 of the 3 snow colors, but they're all in that same 2-5 range.
Another reason, some color archetypes, Boros is one of them as well. You are very rarely incentivized. Oftentimes, if I am in Boros exactly, I still might not run this card, regardless of its snow ability, because you are very disincentivized, or whatever, to not want your shit to come into play tapped, right? Turn 4, the last thing you want is to not be able to cast your 4-drop or your, like, 2-drop plus removal spell. You want all of your lands to be coming into play untapped, and you can be severely punished for having this be your top decked land at any point in a more aggressive deck.
Absolutely, you don't want a bunch of tap lands in your red white aggro deck. It just that's a way to lose games that you shouldn't lose otherwise.
Yes. So I mean, unless I've got a ton of double pip cards, and there is some red burn that had some double pips, but I'm still trying to avoid this in most of those decks.
Yeah, I think a lot of those decks are gonna be happy to play exactly 1 and no more.
I agree with that. That's usually my my cut point as well. Unless everything is just super easy to cast, and then I'm typically just going to avoid it. Enters the battlefield tapped. This is a land that produces a white. For 4 mana, a colorless, 2 red, and a white. You can sacrifice it, search your library for an aura card and or an equipment card, reveal them, put them into your hand, shuffle your library. So this is pretty nice in the right deck.
Yeah, if you can reliably get 2 cards with this, it's card advantage on a land, which is fantastic.
It does.
You can do it in.
It does produce a color, where a lot of I feel like these abilities oftentimes produce colorless. So you can basically just replace this as a plains in your deck if you think you will have any reliable targets. Even if I don't know that I can get both targets, I would probably still be willing to put this in if I had a lot of 1 target.
Yeah, I think as long as I can reliably be, especially because we're in white, be going to get like a bounding gold or a white or a removal spell, then I'm happy to play it. If I'm just getting some sort of marginal equipment that are my last cards in my deck, I'm less happy, but it is kind of free if you don't have other tapped lands.
Yeah, it is definitely free. I think that's why I'm a big fan of it. Like I said, I wouldn't want to run it with 1 or maybe even 2 of a certain target, just because the likelihood of them being drawn before I'm ready to crack this is pretty high. But 3 or 3 total. If I've got 2 and 1, then I'm feeling pretty good. If I get unlucky and draw the 1 beforehand, then that's fine. Yeah, I think this card is fine. I like it.
Yeah, I've got it in that same 2-5 range. Again, it suffers a little for Boros not wanting tapped lands, and also not particularly wanting to spend a turn or 4 mana, digging cards out of your deck. But it's effectively free if you don't have other tap lands. So
still gives you something to do later.
Yeah.
Especially in a Boros deck, once you start to run out of gas, if you have a more aggressive deck, this definitely allows you to keep your foot on the gas. A lot of the equipments allow you to create creatures too, which is going to be something that's going to be very, very powerful. I think that this land works very well with those uncommon cycles that make creatures.
Those definitely make this go up.
I'm actually a little higher on it. I think the deck that doesn't want this is a 1. It's going to be unplayable in a lot of those decks, and the deck that wants it, this is going to be a 3.
I think that's reasonable.
Because, like I said, you're likely going to be casting a rune and making a dude off of your other artifact, which is really nice. We have the green version. Enters battlefield tapped, makes a green for 1 green and 2 plains. You can sacrifice it, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 creatures you control. They gain vigilance and lifelink until end of turn. Activate this like a sorcery. Not as permanent an effect as the last one, but also costs 1 less.
Cost 1 less, it leaves a counter, but again, you're right, or 2 counters, but not nearly the effect of the last card.
But it's also not as negative, right? Like, you don't have to have other cards still in your deck. Yes. This can literally be ran in any green deck. Well, any.
You just have to be green-white for this card to be worth putting in there. I do really wish this didn't require it to be a sorcery speed, because it means you can't use it, even though it's an on-board trick. You can't threaten the use of it with attacks. You have to just go ahead and use it beforehand or not at all. But and you can't dump extra mana at the end of your opponent's turn into this. But again, free, can be played in any green-white deck. I like this card.
I think if it was at instant speed, it might be just a little bit too powerful, only because it's an uncommon land cycle. They're not supposed to be super strong, doubling as like combat tricks and stuff. And also I wouldn't want shady people in paper magic to be hiding these, and you get a lot of that kind of stuff. I think that would just be unnecessary. I think it'd be too strong if they were instant.
It would definitely be way better, and maybe you're right. Maybe it's too strong. I'm just saying I'd like it better.
Oh, I mean, I would also like it better if it just came into play with an 8/8 with trample that killed my opponent upon entering the battlefield. That'd be great. But I think it's fine. Well, wait, I messed this up. I'm actually excited to see what the other ones of the same type do, though.
Agreed.
This will be interesting.
They've both been pretty on theme for what you would expect, right? Boros or as an equipment, Selesnya counters. It makes sense.
Yeah, they definitely are very on brand. I'm gonna let you read this one.
All right. Faceless Haven. It is a snow land at rare. You can tap it to add colorless, snow colorless in this case, and you can pay 3 snow mana. Faceless Haven becomes a 4/3 creature with vigilance and all creature types until end of turn. It's still a land. So we saw a card like this in the last set in the, I'm completely blanking on its name right now.
The last
creature,
set?
Right, we saw the 4 mana turned it into a creature at rare.
Yeah, but that left counters and stuff on it. That got way scarier.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm just saying like a land that turns into a creature is all I'm saying.
Yeah, okay.
We saw recently a colorless land.
Pay 4 mana, it becomes a creature, it gets 2+1/+1 counters. Yeah, Crawling Barrens.
Crawling Barrens. Yep. Yeah, that card was much better than Faceless Haven, both because, like you're saying, it grows over time and gets scary, but also because this needs 3 snow mana other than this to be an effective creature, right? You can technically activate it with itself, but then it's tapped, so why would you?
Agreed.
So again, I think the Snow deck will love this card. It is a free creature in their deck. Outside of a deck that can, very consistently get to 3 snow mana, you're just not ever playing this card.
Yeah, how many? If you can't even include this, you need like what 8 other snowland to justify this.
Yeah, I think you'd need 8 and probably a mana base that doesn't punish you for having a colorless land too much.
Yes, which I think a lot of the snow decks, they seem to, with the exception, the thing I find really interesting about the set is none of the snow requirements require specific color snow, but I think that a lot of the decks are going to be very wide in range as far as their colors, because you have such a limited restraint on how many colors of each snowland you're going to be getting. You can only pick up the ones that are drafted, so you're going to need to play a lot of different colored lands, making it even more difficult to justify playing this uncolored land, right?
Yeah, I mean, while a lot of the snow decks are going to be green-based, I think the heavy green-based decks are going to be the ones that want this the most, because they're more likely to have the other fixing to be able to, put up with playing a colorless land.
Yeah, I just think there's going to be a big restriction of a lot of the snow decks running a wide range of snowlands, up to 4 different colors of snowlands. Just making overall the whole entire mana base more inconsistent.
Oh, it will be. I guess the one good thing for this, though, is they can run this in place of like Snow Plains, because it's basically colorless for both. Assuming they're not white, which the snow decks won't be.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. This is basically, but it doesn't count itself. Was the point? Was so then you have
yes, absolutely.
You have the situation.
Yeah.
Digital Monk Gaming, thanks for the sub. Appreciate it.
So again, this is a 1 in the non-snow deck. It's really nice to have if you can consistently activate it. I mean, it's a 3 at least if you can activate it. I just don't think that's going to be very often.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a free creature that does some nice stuff. It's also vigilance to note, so you can actually hold open that land and still potentially cast something afterwards. You've already dumped 3 mana into this, but it's definitely beneficial. The snow deck, I think, is 3 to 3.5, but other than that, it's going to be unplayable. I agree. We have another uncommon land. Enters battlefield tapped. Adds a plains, and for 2 white, blue, sacrifice it. You gain 2 life. Draw 2 cards. I like drawing cards.
Yeah, I think this card is great. Another perfectly on theme.
I'm confused though. They both produce white.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's every color is going to have 2. I assume
they're going to have 2. Okay, that makes sense. That's a lot more lands than I was expecting.
So I'm guessing like the white-green one we saw produce green. I'm guessing the white-black one will produce black. So every color only has 2.
That makes sense. That's a lot of lands between that and there being rare lands as well.
There are a lot of lands in this set.
Yeah. I like this one a fair bit more than the other two. I like drawing cards a bunch.
Agreed. This is by far my favorite of the cards. Blue-white is typically a color combination that doesn't mind having a land or 2 enter the battlefield tapped.
Absolutely.
So I think this is the best of the 3 we've seen so far.
It's a tad bit overpriced for 2 cards, but it's also not overpriced because it's a free land.
Yeah, and instant speeds, you can do it end to turn. I'm happy to play multiples of these in a blue-white deck. Now, not 4, but I'll play 2.
Yeah, I think I can agree with that. If I have a lot of other draw mechanics, I might be a little bit more hesitant, depending on what my other tapped land situation looked like. But yeah, I think if you are not running a whole bunch of other tapped lands, then 2 is definitely very good.
Yeah, I think this is a 3.
Nintendo is telling us it is pay 6, draw 2, gain 2 life. Thank you. Glacial floodplain. This one adds either and it enters the battlefield tap, so it's just the common cycle. Pretty happy to pick it up for fixing purposes. So weird. Is there really? So there's 5 common lands and then 2 uncommon lands for each color. That's so many uncommon lands.
There are 24 non-basic lands in this set.
Jiminy Christmas, that's a lot.
10 of those are this cycle we're looking at right now. 10 are the cycle we just looked at, and then there's 4 other sort of random utility lands, like the Faceless Haven.
I cannot think of a set that has had this much land in it.
No, it's a lot.
All right, we came to our red one. We're going to move it along a tad bit quicker. Produce red, and for now the highest mana cost, 3 red, green, green. You sacrifice this, destroy target land, create a 4/4 creature token with trample. I like free 4/4s. It's a bit pricey, yep. But I mean, it's free-ish, assuming you don't have too many other tapped lands. But I don't think you will.
Yeah, it's free-ish, and all of a sudden, unlike most sets, destroy target land is looking a little better with all these lands, utility lands in the set.
That's true. Yeah, it doesn't say basic, or you crack their snow land and put their deck in a little bit of a more awkward situation.
Yeah, again, I've got this out of the 4 we've seen right alongside the blue-white one as the 2 I like the best.
I agree. Yeah, I think it's these 2 are the highest for sure. So what do you have the blue-white one and this one at?
I have them both around a 3. And I think in any blue-white or red-green deck, you're going to get that. You're going to play it. So, again, there's a limit to the number of tap lands you can play, but, until you hit that limit, I love these cards.
One thing I did note, or that I'm realizing about these cards, is that the color that it produces is the color that it only makes, that you only have to pay 1 of. So potentially these lands are also possible to be your splash outlets as well. Like, I'm happy to, if I'm splashing white with the gate, it will pay for itself should you no longer need the white source. So it does open it up so that way you can play these a little bit more. I actually kind of assumed it would be the other way around to prevent people from playing it in like their off color situations.
My guess is the theory behind that is it really is costing, like, gates is really costing you 2 white because you're losing the white source itself.
Yeah, I mean, it depends if you need it, right?
Oh yeah, but it's 2 white, blue, blue plus tapping a white land. 3 red, green, green plus tapping a red land. I think that's the theory, at least, behind the cost.
That does make sense. All right, so moving right along, we have the Great Hall of Starnheim. Enters the battlefield tap, as all of them. This is a white, white, black. It creates black. You sacrifice this, create a 4/4 Angel Warrior with flying and vigilance. That's a very large creature for 3 mana. Wait, what?
Yep, but what you missed is it sacrificed this and a creature you control.
I did miss the sacrifice a creature you control. It's that teeny tiny text.
I did the first time I read it too.
Teeny tiny text. Yeah. Now that is like, I was like, this can't be right.
Yeah. 6 mana for a 4/4 trampler, 3 for a 4/4 flying vigilance. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, that doesn't make any. Well, the other one destroyed a land.
Yeah,
I don't know if I would justify paying 3 extra mana for it.
double. Yeah.
Welcome, guys. We're getting a raid from Mr. Metronome. Welcome to our last chunk of our limited Kaldheim set review. This card seems great. All of these are free. I like them all a ton. Honestly, they're probably all, because they're free. The only thing I was thinking is while we were doing the colors, we said that we thought, like, you know, white and black seemed a little bit more aggressive than we typically see in the last couple of sets. So I'm just wondering how much these seem slightly, you know, expensive, but they're free, so they're great. But is it going to be feasible to have a bunch of tapped lands and these slower, you know, 6 mana, 7 mana technically, right? Because you have to tap itself too, to do this thing. Good value or not, is the game going to go that long? We have to, you know, we'll wait till tomorrow and see, right? Tomorrow's Wednesday for the streamer event.
Yeah, I think I agree that they're this is gonna be pretty aggressive, but what's nice about these cards is that a lot of times when you're trying to survive that aggressive rush, you spend so many resources trying to survive that then you just kind of end up in a top deck war. Well, here you've got an extra spell that you can top deck. Or that you've top decked earlier and played into the battlefield and now you can activate. I do like this white-black one. The fact that it seems pretty aggressive means you probably have a bunch of little creatures that you don't mind sacrificing to get a 4/4.
Yeah, and we've saw a lot of white and black that produced creatures with boast,
Yep.
or when they die, they produced a 1/1 or a 1/1 spirit, a 1/1 soldier. So honestly, that plays very well. Also, there was like the white, or I'm sorry, the black elf that makes them discard on 2. I feel like those are going to be great sacrifice targets for this. It does seem like there is a sub-sacrifice theme, and making it not too hard to trigger this card. I'm not concerned about finding a decent sack target for this.
No, and it's smart that they made this card activated only as sorcery, so you can't use it to, you know, sack a creature that's being targeted with removal.
It's too strong. I think the whole cycle
that
would be too strong if it was...
That would be too good. Well, they're a mix. Some of them are instant, some aren't. So I think they were smart to put that as a sorcery.
Agreed. We got just the Gruul tapped land. Moving on, we have the
Demir tap land.
Demir, that's the word I'm looking for. My brain died all of a sudden. Okay, we have another produces black, the second one of the bunch, and this is 1 colorless black, red, red. Sacrifice it, deal 3 damage to target player. That player discards a card. I mean, by the time you want to get rid of your excess land, whether or not they have a card in their hand, we don't know quite yet how long these games are going to go, but I mean, it seems good.
Yeah, it's free reach for a Rakdos deck, which is a lot of times what you want if they've managed to stave off your aggressive rush.
Certainly.
You know, makes them discard. Again, just like all these, right? They're free. It's a relevant ability, so I'm thrilled with it.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think all of these cards so far that we've seen are going to be, you know, other than the Boros one that required a specific number of targets in your deck, the others are all at least 3s in every deck until you start getting, you know, 3, 4, 5 tap lands.
I agree. I think this one's better, gonna be better in the average deck. I do think that the Boros one, now that said, the Boros one does leave a lot more staying power on the board. With, you know, the artifact and an enchantment, if you're hitting both. The deck that's good in, I think that is going to bring a lot to the table, literally. But it's just not going to be very often that happens. So I just think they're all great. They're a bit of some, you know, build around or not, they're going to be good.
All right. After that, we have Jarrah Mirrorleak. It enters battlefield tap. This is one of the blue ones of this. Produces blue. And for 2 green, green, blue, sacrifice it, create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except it enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it, and can only be done at sorcery speed. And 5 mana, I mean, yeah, you have to have a creature. And this one is vulnerable to your creature being destroyed in response. So there's a little bit of risk on this card, and you can only do it at sorcery speed, but still free, copying your 3/3 and getting a 4/4. You know, I'm sold.
Yeah, like I said, it is a very high mana cost for a 4/4 essentially. but it depends. You know, it could have flying, it could have whatever, which is really nice. But there is a little added risk, and it is technically free. The mana cost is kind of irrelevant because it's just taking the place of a land, which you know you won't need later in the game. So I think the key to this, guys, is going to be that you're just not filling your deck with too many of them. I don't think that's going to be an issue because they are going to be highly sought after. I think they're good enough, and they hit a wide range of color themes. So, because like I said, each color has 2. I don't think they'll be floating around super late for people to get, you know, 7 of them. But you never know. Maybe they will.
Yeah, I think you're right. They're going to be taken early. I think there's a risk if it all lines up right that you end up with like 7 that fit your deck in sealed, and you try to play all of them, and that could be a problem.
Yes.
But you're right. That's not going to come up very often. All right.
Yeah, every draft pod is also weird now, especially on Arena. We've got, you know, player drafting. Sometimes you'll get into a pod where it's just very clear that nobody values lands or whatever. And you could just have some freak accident where you just end up with too many of these. And I think that that is a good trap to fall into, thinking, oh, they're free. And then you just have all of them and you're just like, oh, 3-drop land tapped, 4-drop land tapped, 5-drop land tapped. That's how you'll lose games real quick. So another blue one, guys. 3 colorless, blue, black, black. Sacrifice it, mill 4 cards. Then return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Okay. Interesting. Helps hit, you know, something. So even if you don't have any, you know, any relevant targets, you're gonna be likely to get something with the 4 mana. Whether it's something good or not, we don't know.
Yeah, this is a card you don't mind the expensive mana cost because you want your graveyard to be fairly full when you use it.
Agreed.
So
yeah, keep in mind, guys, the mana cost on this is essentially 7 mana, which is really high. I mean, I always advocate for 7 drops aren't too high so long as you have 1, especially in sealed draft. You can support 1, green maybe can support 2, but it is a lot of mana. The other thing I'll say about this particular card, which isn't true to the others, the value of this kind of goes up the overall like average value of the cards in your deck. So if you've got 2 big bombs worth getting back, then this is great. If your deck is full of 3/3s, I mean, maybe you might even want to run less land and not run this and then run more dudes. I don't know. Because you could just draw that dude just as well as opposed to drawing this late game and then casting 7 to get 1 back.
Yeah, definitely scales up with the number of bombs creatures you have. It is instant speed, which is nice. So blue-black, a lot of times you are a deck that's trying to leave up draw spells or counter magic. And if they don't play anything, you can use this at the end of your turn. It mitigates the fact that the creature comes in tapped because you can do it on their end step and then it'll untap. And you can get kind of a haste attacker out of it. So we're going to be repeating ourselves a lot on these cards, but they're all kind of free.
They're all free. They're all good. I'm in that like 2.5 to 3.5-ish range on them, depending on their abilities. All right, let's go ahead and move on. We've got the Simic tapped land. Fine. Shimmerdrift Veil. Shimmerdrift enters the battlefield tapped. Surprise, surprise. Enters the battlefield, choose a color, add a mana of the color of the chosen type. That seems great. It's only a common. It's just a fixer, right? So you can add it in as a fixing source for whatever your splash is, but then let's say you draw that, then you're not punished for having that in your deck. Versus another, if you were to run like 3 planes for your splash card, you might draw planes as opposed to your second black for your, double black spell. So it removes some of the punishment, but it does come into play tapped, so I like it.
Yeah, it's just a fixer. It's snow, which is the other, just like the duels. So if you want that, you're happy to run this in place of a basic, or if you're trying to splash.
Now the question is, are you running this on, assuming you don't pick up too many other tapped lands, because we've already discussed that, those ones that have abilities I think are going to be better. But if you're not splashing anything, are you running this just for the flexibility on the land type? If it's like your only 1 or 2 tapped lands, is this something you consider running?
Yeah, I would. It's a dual land basically in that case, just like a fetch land would be that you can go and get the one you need.
Yeah,
you would play those. You don't take them super high because you only get to make that choice once and it enters tapped, but you will play it.
So I very much view this just like the other dual enter the battlefield tapped lands in this format, just because, yeah, they produce 2 colors for the entire time that they're on the battlefield, but I feel like by the time you're playing this or you get your opening hand, you know which one is the one you're short on. A lot of times your hand will have like 1/1 in this, or just 2 in this, and then you just know what your other color is, and it's not going to be quite, you know, that restricting, and I'm happy to run this, assuming I don't have too many taps or I'm not in Boros.
Yeah, the duels are better in straight 2-color decks. This is better in if you have a 3rd color.
Yeah, but it's fine otherwise.
But it's fine. Yeah, it's still fine to play.
All right, we got our next green ability land. 2 black, black, green. Sacrifice it. Up to 1 target creature you don't control gets -2/-2 until end of turn. Create 2 1/1 elf warrior tokens. And it's a sorcery speed. I like it. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, I mean, I like all of them. This might be my favorite one so far. I mean, you're getting a free removal spell, a small one, but a free removal spell on a land, and creating tokens of relevant creature type for the set, especially for black-green, which is going to have a lot of elves. I think this card is great.
Yeah, I like this a bunch. I will say it's only 1 less than the Gruul one. I think I'm probably more in the Gruul plan. I feel like now that I'm seeing how many lands there are in this format, I think the Gruul land is going to hit something, and then something decent. Fair. And
that's a good point.
If you're taking them off of this card plus making a 4/4, that seems super valuable. I think I like that a little bit more than the -2/-2. I feel like the -2/-2 is going to be hitting something more consistently, whereas the destroying one of these lands I think will be a bigger board swing overall, but hit less amounts of turns, right? Times, whatever.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with that. The Gruul one is very good as well.
Yeah, it's only 1 more. The Gruul one felt really expensive, but now I feel like as we continue to go, they're getting more and more expensive. Like the Dimir one was the same cost. I think it was 6.
Yeah, it was
7 technically with it, right?
Yep. Yeah, they're mostly all. Yep. Good.
Nope. Go ahead.
I say they're mostly all, other than the black-white one, which you had to sack a creature, and the black-red one, which doesn't leave a lasting advantage. They're all pretty expensive.
Yeah, the blue one felt a little lower too. Also, the Boros was only 4. Orzoft going, you know, tap land, moving on. Rakdos moving on. We have our second red one, so 2 blue, blue, red. It sacrifice it, scry 2, deals 2 damage to each creature. Interesting.
Yeah. This one's a little more situational than some of the others. I mean, scry 2 is always fine, but you know, if it was just that, it would, you know, might still be worth playing because it's free, but it's not good. But you know, the pyroclasm effect is either fantastic or kind of irrelevant. Again, sometimes you catch it right in the middle, I guess. But
that's the nice thing about these, though, is that it takes the place of a mountain. So whether it's amazing or irrelevant, you're not getting punished really for playing it without, you know, with the exception of the 1 tapped land. And as long as your deck isn't too full of them, that's not really a downside either. I mean, there'll be the 1 corner case where you have 1, and that is your 4th land draw that you draw on turn 4, but that doesn't happen all that often. I feel like you'll get your payoff as much. The other thing is you were saying pyroclasm is either terrible or great. It'll be slightly less great because they're going to see it coming.
True. I think, yeah, you're right. That does make it worse.
But also, you, like you said, you know, sometimes it's just a dead card because your opponent's like, ha, 2/3, haha, 2/4, ha 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 ha, 4/4, and then you're just like, well, guess I shouldn't have played this card in my main deck. But
but then again, you're right. The fail case is it's a mountain that comes into play tapped, which is
not so
good,
bad.
but it's not, you know, you didn't replace much with it. The opportunity cost was nothing.
Removes most of the downside of it. Hey, Strix Familiar, how you doing, hun?
All right. Pyrite Sanctum is our next card. It's a rare land. Taps for colorless. You can pay 2 and tap it. Target legendary creature becomes a god in addition to its other types, and put a +1/+1 counter on it. And you can pay 4 and sacrifice this to put an indestructible counter on target god. This is an interesting card, but it's just not good.
It's good if you use your artifact to make 8 extra lands. You know what I'm talking about? Tap it 8 times, make 8 things, and then you just make all your guys indestructible.
Well, you have to sacrifice this to make things indestructible.
Oh, boo! That's way less fun.
And the first ability to make a god only targets legends. So, this is just not a limited card.
What? Okay, yeah, there was like 2 key things I completely missed about that card when you were reading it. I was like, 6 mana to make your card indestructible is not that bad. It's really slow. I feel like the most games will be over before that becomes super relevant, but
yeah, now, there are, legends and gods that don't have, that you don't need this to turn into gods at rare instead of mythic. There are legends in every color.
There's
You are
not
going
enough.
to occasionally, no, you are occasionally going to see a deck that wants this, and you'll be able to get it because nobody else at the table wants it.
Most decks, this is going to be a 1.
Yes,
all but
it's not,
one
it's
deck.
not even snow to try to make up for it.
Yes, I agree with that. If it was snow, you might just run it because of the corner case of just wanting an uncolored snow land is fine.
Yeah, and if you had 1 legend, okay, fine. Maybe I'll take the snow mana and maybe I can get a counter or 2.
I feel like I'm still gonna, even if I have that one situation, I will draft this set 1,000 times and probably still never run this card, because I feel like even if you do have, like, let's say 2 legends, and you're just like, oh, maybe, and then you put this in there, and then they're just like, in response, I burn it, and you're just like, well, shit.
Yep.
And then you, like, blew up your land, spent 4 turns.
Yeah, this has a, very, very, very corner case playability.
Yeah, I don't even know if I'd risk it at that point.
Agreed.
All right, so we've got the Izzet dual land, we've got the Golgari dual land. Oh, the World Tree. I saw this one going around on Twitter a ton. People were very excited about it in the world of 60 card decks.
Yeah, the World Tree for some reason is not a legendary land. I'm not really sure why, but it is just a land. It enters the battlefield tapped. It adds green. As long as you control 6 or more lands you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color, and then pay double Wooburg, white, blue, black, red, green, and sacrifice it to search your library for any number of god cards, put them onto the battlefield, and then shuffle your library.
It'll be fun to trigger it, but
yes, this is definitely going on my achievement list to actually activate this at some point in this set.
I would agree if it wasn't specifically god cards, because I don't think you'll have enough to justify like, that doesn't even seem like an exciting, because you're just like, oh, I got a World Tree and a god.
Oh, I fully expect the time I activate this that I will get 0. I will just get to say that I activated it.
Fair. Yanks and I were actually talking about a new video that I'm planning where I'm going to make a bunch of limited quests for you guys, and hopefully I'll record some footage of me doing the quests or whatever fun silly things, like for you to win with poison counters or to win with whatever, make your little squirrel, indestructible squirrel flying, things like that. That would just be really fun and silly. I don't know that this would make the cut on that video, but it is funny.
Yeah. Now there is a good point be made in chat that actually you can get changelings with this. They are gods.
Oh, so you get 1 god and like 3 changelings, and now we're in business? Is that what we're saying?
It's any number, so you could theoretically drop like 8 changelings onto the board or something.
Yeah, if they have it. I was just,
if you have them, yeah.
I was estimating how many changelings you would have.
Yeah. Or that artifact that makes everything in your creature, the 4-mana artifact that turns every creature in your deck into a changeling.
Oh, yes. And then you can poop out
your whole creatures worth a deck. Your whole deck worth of creatures.
We're getting closer and closer to constructed. Let's move on. That is a 0 playable card in my book. We made it to the Modals. If I'm not mistaken, Modals is the last thing. Right, guys?
Yep.
So we only have 15-ish cards left. All right, we have Halvar, God of Battle, legendary god, 4/4 for 4. Already decent priced, double pip cost. Creatures you control are that are enchanted or equipped have double strike. We see that mechanic on generic white uncommons, right? At the beginning of each end step, you may attach target aura or equipment you control to target creature you control. So the aura bit's a little interesting because it lets you move it from creature to creature, but like you can't, recur them. Right?
Yeah, it lets you, before you go into combat, it lets you move around one of your auras or equipment to something that might have a better attack.
Yeah. It's interesting because then you don't, you can move the auras you can't usually do. That's one of the first times I've ever seen that type of an ability.
Yeah. Two other actually kind of interesting things. One is it's each combat, so you can put an aura equipment on one of your attacking creatures, and then before they go into combat on their turn, move it to something that's untapped to have a better blocker with double strike.
That's something I think people will miss in paper for sure.
It also weirdly specifies its target aura or equipment attached to a creature you control, not one you own. So if they've enchanted one of your creatures with like a bound in gold, you can move it to something else.
Yes.
Which is a very odd mechanic that I don't think we've seen before.
That is going to be something that people on the opposite side of the board don't recognize either and might play into as well, because they'll put it, cast it. I mean, they don't have much of a choice anyway, but
yeah, now we'll be playing this on Arena obviously at first, but I could imagine if this set came out first in paper at the same time, the first time somebody did that, you would think that people are going to think you're cheating. Until they reread the card very closely.
Many judge calls would be called on this, I think. Yeah. It might also be a reason, like if you know that oh no, that doesn't make much sense. Anyway, the other side, Sword of the Realms. It is the flip side to our god. All of them do something else. This one is an artifact equipment. The other ones I've seen weren't equipments, but so that's interesting. And the equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has vigilance. That's a fair amount of value for a 2 mana with 2 equip. I do like that. I think that meets my requirements as far as cost goes. Whenever equipped creature dies, return it to its owner's hand. Huh. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, both sides of this card are fantastic. It's going to be very interesting, especially if we see more of these gods if they're this good on both sides. The ability to determine when you're supposed to play each side is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, so I had the Black God, which we'll see Aegon in just a little bit here. I feel like that is a little bit more, at least for limited, Aegon is just the best side. The other side, not super useful unless you have a ton of synergies. More of a constructed thing where you can play one flipped the other way to help fuel the other one. Again, we'll see it in just a few minutes, but it didn't seem like it had a great use for the other side of it in limited compared to this, which I don't know which one is stronger, to be honest.
Yeah, I actually think the equipment side is going to be stronger most of the time.
I like
not always.
The equipment side, it turns your creature into a huge threat that has to be answered, and then that comes back to your hand. So you just get like this kind of infinite cycle of value, but also playing a 4/4 on turn 4.
Yeah.
With, that makes other equipped creatures have double strike. If you have any other amount of equipments, or if you are, like, let's say, light on creatures on the board or in your hand, because, you might not have a ton, then the creature is just going to be better. But I think if you aren't short on cards, then I like the equipment. This is tough. Yeah, they're both great.
Yeah. And one thing I think that's really interesting, and this was the case on Egon when you previewed that as well, and this is not going to come up in limited very often, but these cards really synergize with themselves, right? The backside and front side work really well together.
Yeah, which actually negates a lot of the, legendary mechanic, which is just really an interesting thing, because you can play one on one side and then one on the other, so you don't have, like, it's almost like, why did they even bother making them legendary in the first place, other than the fact that they're a god, for flavor purposes. But
yeah, and I think, and you get to put abilities on them that really would be abusable if there were 2 of them out at once or something like that. Not in this case, but on some other ones. But I mean, this card's great. This card is 4/5.
Yeah, I mean, on it's so weird. I think the equipment is strong enough to me. 2 mana makes +2/+0 in vigilance, and then you just get your creature back if and when they can ever handle it or trade for it. 2/0 is going to trade up, or at even every single time. You get it back. ETB effects become insane. I love this enchantment.
Yeah, the more I'm looking at it, the more I think the equipment is just the better side. It's so much harder to remove. It's going to continually generate value.
It is.
It's
like
cheap to equip.
I think the only way you're not casting it for this side versus the creature side is if you just don't have enough creatures on the board. If it's a late game draw and you have one creature on board, yeah, then it's a little tough. You might want the second body, but yeah, I just think the sword is insanely good.
Which is great because it removes the fact that it's a modal card removes the downside of equipment where they're useless if you have no creatures.
Yep.
Well, now you have one.
It doesn't have a instant. The value it puts on the board at any one given time is not that powerful, but over time, as you make these trades and get your creatures back, it's just generating this insane amount of value, which makes me want to put it up to just a 5 bomb. It's just going to win you the game.
Yeah, it very well might be.
And it's so unlikely that they're going to be able to deal with it at an artifact. Most artifact removals sideboards, best of one on Arena is very popular. This just seems nuts.
Yeah, I agree.
So 4, 5, or 5, obviously. I think the more creatures you have in your deck, the better. Also, keep in mind, guys, they can't be they can't be tokens. So if like the bulk of your deck is like some token generators and stuff, then you're going to be more inclined to play the flip side, right?
Yep.
All right, we have God of the Worthy. It is a 3 mana 2/3 flying vigilance. Great stats. I'm sold. This card already seems great. Snow lands your opponent's control enter the battlefield tapped on 3 mana. Also pretty good. Means that they're going to be missing a lot of their land drops and not hitting their curves. Non-creature spells your opponent's cast with converted mana cost 4 or greater cost 2 more. Hudja, this card seems great.
This card is really mean.
It does a lot of things.
Make sure opponents not have much fun.
Yeah, that's how I love to play Magic, when I'm having fun and they are not.
Oh, it's a 0 fun game. It's a 0-sum game. If
No.
I have all the fun, you don't get to have it.
Yeah, perfect. Let's see, the flip side, tiny text, I'm gonna let you take it.
All right. Flip side is Valcamira, Protector Shield. It's a 4 mana, 3 and a white legendary artifact. If a source an opponent controls would deal damage to you or a permanent you control, prevent one of that damage. And whenever you or another permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, counter that spell or ability unless its controller pays 1. So anything that tries to deal damage to you or anything you've got, every time that happens, you take 1 less or it takes 1 less. And if they try to target you with anything, they have to pay 1 or it gets countered. Target you or your stuff.
That's a lot of things.
Yeah.
The counter ability is easy enough to play around.
Yeah, this one, unlike the last card, I really do think you're going to play the creature the
more
vast
often.
majority of the time, limited.
Now, what I do like, there's one way we don't want to do that, and that's against the very aggressive decks that we've been seeing. If their deck is full of 2/2s and 3/2s, I'm loving this other side. Reducing the damage to you or permanents you control by 1. That's going to make all of your trades not trade. It's going to make it so you can take a bunch of beats to the face and not really like have any issue, and allow you to stabilize, on turn 5 and 6 in a really nice way. A 2/3 might also do that, but a lot of aggressive decks are going to see a ton of tempo removal, and I think that might, this 3 but is going to be too quickly answered most of the time in those kinds of decks. I think against the aggressive deck with the equivalent to double or triple into the Royal, or no, Royal Eruption, which we did see a 3 mana 4 damage spell. We saw potentially 2 mana 6 damage spells. There's a ton of really good removal. I like the other side against an aggressive deck. Otherwise, we're playing this face up, right?
Yeah. Yes, I agree. The backside is definitely more useful against the hyper aggressive decks. The scary part about that is that means you're spending 4 mana to not stop them from doing anything the next turn. But if you're on the play, you might be able to saving yourself 3 or 4 damage that one turn might give you enough time to stabilize.
Yeah, if you're especially if you're on the play, you're saving yourself 3 or 4 mana or 3 or 4 life every turn.
Every turn, yeah.
Yeah. And it allows your creatures to then be alive a lot easier too. If you play a creature then after that to block and stabilize, what would be a trade now is no longer a trade. Yeah, I like it.
Yep. Also, just note the non-creature spells clause here on the front side. If you foretell a card, like Doomscar, for example, that's a 5 mana spell, but you only have to pay 3 to foretell it, that's still going to count here because the CMC doesn't change when you foretell a card.
Agreed. I think that the first one is like 80% to play the artifact equipment. This one's like 80% to play the god bird.
Yeah, agreed. What do you have this card at?
Oh, it's weird because it's really annoying.
Yeah.
In many, many, many ways, but it's not like insta winning the game in any way. It's making their board slow. It's making their spells a pain. I mean, I think it's like a 4. I want to say it's higher, but
no, I think that's right. I mean, I think it's a 2/3 flying vigilance for 3. You'd be looking at like a 3-ish, maybe a little better, and all the other abilities just add to that. But this is not really a game-winning card.
yeah,
It's a card that can generate advantage and help tilt the board in your favor, but it's tough for it to win the game by itself.
Now I will say that your opponent casting one thing or casting a turn behind every single turn and then not being able to remove your creatures with their removal does win games. But like whether or not that becomes super relevant is going to be a bit situational on your opponent's deck, but I think it's very good. I'm in the 4 range.
Sounds good.
All right, we have God of the Cosmos. It is a legendary god. He gets +1/+1 for each card in your hand and each foretold card you own in exile. That's kind of a neat extra little bonus as well. It is a 1/1 for 5, so it's a bit on the pricey side, so make sure you guys have some card draw. At the beginning of your end step, choose a creature type, then reveal the top 2 cards of your library. Put all creatures of the chosen type into your hand, and the rest in the bottom of your library in any turn. Okay. Seems good. I mean, obviously highly synergistic. You want lots of draw, you want lots of creature types. Changelings are great in blue here. And the flip side is a ginormous bird. Flying. When it deals combat damage to a player, return it to its owner's hand, then scry 2.
Yeah, I think this card is great. You don't have the really issue with some of the other cards. You have to decide how to play it. You just play this as a bird on turn 2 or turn 3, whatever. Attack into it, and then you get an effect. Assuming you can get a 2/3 flyer through, which you probably can. Scry 2, and then you get it back, so you can play it as the front side, which is the more powerful side. You get both halves of the card instead of just one most of the time.
I agree with that, but I feel like neither side is as powerful as the other 2 that we've been seeing.
I think the front side is very powerful. Beginning of your end step, choose a card type, so just creature. I can get a pretty good chance to draw 2 creatures.
Oh, I thought it said creature type, not card type.
Nope, card type.
That is way better. I thought it was like, okay, so elf or whatever. And you hit 1 out of 2 times or something. You hit an elf or something.
And probably once, like depending on when you play the bird. If you attack with it on turn 4, scry 2, and then bring it back and then replay it on turn 5, there's a chance you'll know one of your cards you can guarantee to hit 1.
And it happens at the end step, beginning of your end step. So yeah, you attack with the bird, you bring it back. Oops, I'm going the other direction.
Yeah.
And then recast it for 5, drawing potentially both the cards that you put there.
Yeah, late game, if you if you have enough mana, you can attack with this. Play, bring it back. Scry 2, leave them both on top, or leave one of them on top. If it's, say, a creature and a land, you can bottom the land, replay this, and then draw a creature and potentially draw a second creature.
This feels, in comparison to the other gods, it feels a little bit more like a lower impact planeswalker to me that's going to generate a ton of value over a long period of time versus something that's going to come down and affect the board very heavily when it comes down. And I think the other gods are a little bit more like that. This is going to be, a bit more grindy. You're going to want to hit them for 2, scry, then replay this for 5, draw 2 cards, end your turn. This guy gets +2/+2 for that turn, so he's a good blocker. But again, this is a very slow process. And also, then you can't, this isn't something you can do multiple times, right? Because you can't bring this guy back to your hand once you've cast the bird.
Yeah, you can only do that trick once. But I mean, just on its own, even just the backside, it's a 2-mana 2/3 flyer with a relevant ability. That alone is pretty good.
I agree. I actually wish that you had the option to bring it back, because what if you can't cast it for 5? Then kind of sucks. I'd like to hit them and cast something else and keep doing that. So I think not being able to choose whether you bring it back to your hand is a little weird.
Yeah,
it punishes you a little bit.
Yeah, that's probably the price you pay for being a 2-mana 2/3 flyer.
Yeah, this feels like a planeswalker that's going to like each turn draw you cards and then kind of like protect itself versus like the Chandra that comes down, lays down a carpet, and ends the game. This is going to be very grindy and very valuable over a multiple turn scenario. So if you're super far behind, this is going to be a lot worse than a lot of the other ones.
Agreed. I still really like this card. It is slower process, but I still think this is like a 4.
Oh, I agree. Oh yeah, I was definitely not trying to argue that down, but like the other ones felt like they could, or at least the one white artifact. Yeah, that one felt like it could end the game.
Agreed.
In a turn. Getting one thing back is just already starting this huge cycle where it's like, okay, well, you play this bird on 2, you can't really attack with it for a couple of turns and progress your board, right? Because you could scry and then you have to replay it. You're just basically keeping the same bird on the board every turn for turn 2 and or for turn 3 and 4. It's a little clunky. So you might be incentivized to just not attack with it. And it's a 2/3, so it's an okay maybe blocker, but you don't really want to block with it in case of a combat trick. It felt a lot more awkward and slow.
Yeah, I mean, it is nice that it's the scry 2, even if you have to recast it, it does help you potentially find that third land drop if you kept the 2-lander or something like that. But you're right, it can be kind of clunky.
Great value, long term.
Yep. I'm guessing I'm reading this because it's a little tiny text.
Tiny.
Cosima, God of the Voyage. It's 2 and a blue for a 2/4 legendary creature god. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may exile it. If you do, it gains whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control. If Cosima is exiled, you may put a voyage counter on it. If you don't, return Cosima to the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it and draw X cards, where X is the number of voyage counters on it. So, 3-mana 2/4, and your upkeep you can put into exile. And then every land drop basically has landfall. You can put a counter on it if you want. If you don't, bring it back, and it has X counters and draw X, where X is the number of counters on it.
Okay, so it just gets bigger slowly with landfall, and it exiles itself sometimes?
Yeah, you get to choose to exile it. You get to choose when to bring it back, how many counters on it based on if you can afford to keep waiting. If you don't have any land drops coming, you can use it to draw cards and then send it back again and start the cycle over if you hit more lands with your draw.
Yes.
It's another card that's, Modal cards already are kind of inherently skill testing and having to decide which of the two sides to play. This adds even more to it.
Yes, this one seems a bit interesting. It doesn't seem, again, very slow by itself. It's a solid creature that's going to get some work done, but again, it's going to take several turns and a bunch of weird stuff to happen.
Yeah. Now the backside of this card is called the Omen Keel. It's 1 and a blue for a 3/3 legendary vehicle, and with crew 1. And whenever a vehicle you control deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles that many cards from the top of their library, and you can play lands from among those cards for as long as they remain exiled.
So that really helps the other side of this. It seems more constructed-y to me by a fair amount.
Yeah, that part is definitely a constructed synergy that it works with both sides, but both sides of this card are pretty good. 2-mana 3/3 with crew 1 that lets you steal lands from their deck. All right, I mean, it's not bomb, but it makes sure you don't miss your land drops. And then
Certainly.
on the flip side, a 3-mana 2/4 with with an optional ability that grows, so you get to decide when to get rid of it. If you just need the 2/4, you can keep it until the board's stabilized, and then start exiling it and trying to draw some cards. It's whenever a land enters the battlefield, it triggers, so you can, if you just keep drawing lands and you start flooding, you can just bring it back to try to draw something else. Like, there's a lot of flexibility here.
It is definitely a lot of flexibility. I don't feel like this is winning you the game on its own in any quick, meaningful way, but it is a lot of value and it's a ton of flexibility for what you might need.
Agreed, it's slow. But if you can afford to leave Cosima exiled for 3 land drops and bring it back as a 5/7 to draw 3, that's pretty powerful.
It is definitely very powerful, yeah.
Again, though, you're right. It's slow. It's, we're still looking at Halvar and his flip side of Sword of the Realms is the standard bearer for the gods so far. It's nowhere near that level.
Well, yeah, he's also a mythic versus the rares.
This is a rare, yep.
So, but, I mean, mythics tend to be more bomby, so I'm pretty happy with that. I still think this is like about a 4, 3.5.
Yeah.
Again, only because I just don't know that the format is going to be accepting of spending an entire turn to cast a dude and then exiling him for 3 turns. I feel like you might just be dead.
Yeah, which is why I like the fact that if that's the case, you just leave it out there as a 2/4.
Yeah.
Right. That's the downside, is it's a 3-mana 2/4 that helps you stabilize the board. I mean, yes, they might kill it, but that's a risk with any creature.
Absolutely, yeah. Which is part of the reason where I feel like this is either going to be a vehicle or it is going to be a 2/4 for a good long while. Is the only reason I'm hesitant to bump it up any higher than the 3.5 or 4.
Yeah.
What did you have it at?
I have it at a 4. I wouldn't put it any higher than that.
The more aggressive the format's going to be, I think the weaker this card will be.
Yes.
But never bad. Playable in every blue deck. Please don't, think that I'm saying that this is not a good card. It is certainly a good card. I just don't know how good.
Agreed.
My preview card. Woo!
We've seen this one before.
Twitter, as I said on Twitter, this is Ego, God of Death, because typos. I didn't have Yanks check that tweet for me.
Well, I mean, too many waffles can be bad for the heart, so.
I couldn't have anybody edit the tweet because I scheduled the tweet ahead of time and I wasn't allowed to preview the card to anybody. So even if I had showed you the tweet, you wouldn't have seen the picture to know there was a typo. You would have just been like, what a weird name for a card. This is a card I actually made a full YouTube video about, guys. It is a 6/6 for 3 with Death Touch. Death Touch is a bit weird, but sure. Free text is free text. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile 2 cards. If you cannot, you sacrifice it and draw cards. So it replaces itself if you can't meet the requirements. So, the downside is pretty minimal. And then on the other side, we have the Throne of Death. You can play it for just 1 mana. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you may mill a card. Pay 3 mana, exile a creature from your graveyard to draw a card. So it's just an engine to help you draw. You can exile the creatures that have died. Or in Constructed, which is not very relevant here, you play your first one flipped for the throne, and then you play the creature, your next one flipped up, which is kind of like generating the value for itself, which is pretty nice.
Yeah, all these cards, so far, all these gods kind of synergize with themselves, which is not relevant for Limited, because the odds of getting 2 of them are pretty low. But being said, 3 mana 6/6 Death Toucher, yeah, you're not playing this on turn 3.
No. Certainly not.
But if you can play it on turn 6 with, a 6/6 is still really relevant then. You've got some cards in your graveyard, even if it sticks around only a couple turns, you've probably forced some jumps or gotten some damage through, and then at the end, you still get to replace itself by drawing a card.
Yes, absolutely. It won't replace itself if it dies. It's just only if you sacrifice it, so... Yeah. But if it dies, that means you're probably getting the value for it anyway. It's a 3 mana thing that, demanded a premium removal, or it got double blocked or whatever. So I think this card is good. I'm actually thinking that this is one of the ones that are going to be a little bit more borderline as to which side is better. It's going to depend on the deck, how many spells you have, things like that. If you have any other cards that put cards in your graveyard, then the creature side is going to get a lot better. But 2 cards a turn even if you're playing this on turn 5 or 6, it's not going to stick around all that long. It is tough to maintain that amount of cards in your yard, but the throne side actually feels quite powerful as a late game mana sink as well. If I'm drawing this on, on a later turn, I've got like 6 mana in play, but where is the line of how many cards you have to have in your graveyard to where you would want to play this for the creature versus where you'd want to play this for the throne? Let's say you have, between 5 and 7 cards in your graveyard. Most of them are creatures. What do you like better? Potentially drawing 4 cards over a couple of turns with extra mana? Or do you like a 6/6 that you're going to be able to have out for 3 turns? I don't know the answer. This one is a bit more borderline.
Yeah, I think I'm a little lower on the backside than you are. I still think it's very good, and there are definitely going to be times where you want to play Throne of Death. But I think at most of these times, if there's a decision and it's close, I'm going to err on the side of the creature. Throne of Death is just, it's cheap, but it's also slow at the same time, which is kind of a weird combination.
It is certainly slow. And the idea that the Aegon, when you can no longer support it, does replace itself, it counts for one of the triggers of the throne. Whereas in my hypothetical, you're getting like 3 to 4 draws off of the throne. So, I mean, I guess technically you can drop that down, right? And say that one of them is accounted for with the creature type side. I just worry that you won't have enough to support it. But again, you get to draw, so that's not a bad thing. The card's still great.
Yeah, agreed. Both sides are very good, very powerful. They are more conditional than the other gods we've seen so far, but that doesn't mean they're not incredibly strong in the right spots.
Agreed. What do you have a score on this one?
I have this at a 3/5 just because it actually needs some support where the other ones we've seen don't yet. But I think it's still very good, and if you have any sort of synergy with getting cards in your graveyard, whether it be self-mill or even if you just have a deck that's filled with cheap spells, or cheap creatures that are going to go to the yard, then I could definitely see this being higher.
Yeah, it is a weird one. Also, I would say maybe like in a card, or in a color pairing of like blue-black where you've got some card draw and stuff, potentially feels a fair amount better because you'll be able to then have more cards to make more things happen, whether they're spells to cast, you draw more cards. Having more cards will fuel your graveyard faster, so that might be something to consider too. Or sacking your lands. That will also make your graveyard fill faster to make this side much better.
And the Dimir land mills for 4, so
boom, boom, right? So it's 5. You're gonna, get an extra 2.5 turns off that Dimir land alone.
Yep.
All right, moving along, guys. Tergrid, God of Fright. It is a 4/5 menace for 5. Whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent or discards a permanent card, you may put a card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Hutja, what?
Well, it's specifically that card.
Yeah.
So it's whatever it sacrifices or they discard. But yeah, that's really powerful.
Okay. This seems better than my god. Ooh.
Yeah, we did not see a ton of things that make people make opponents sacrifice.
Well, there's like a common spell. Yeah. There's the discard rat elf, and then there's
we did see some discard.
And it just says permanent, so if they discard their lands, you can steal them.
Yep. Also, if they sacrifice any of those sacrifice lands.
Yeah, it steals sack lands. Goodness.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that.
So, yeah, I mean, this card is very good.
A little bit of a build around. I mean, it's good even if you have 0 discard spells in your deck, it's still great because of the sacrifice options, right? There are both creatures and lands typically. There's a lot of lands. I can't think of the creatures off the top of my head. There's that really bad 0/4.
Yes.
So this will then get to put all of them onto your side. It'll have, fringe sacrifice things on the board mechanics to make that happen. There are cards that make you sacrifice a creature. The land itself. Oh, if they sacrifice the black land that makes them sack a creature, can you get them both?
Yeah, I mean, what really is happening here, right, is it just turns those lands off. They're just not going to use them while this is on the battlefield.
It depends. I mean, you would get that land, right? But then you might not be able to pay the ability for it.
True.
So I think more often than not, you're not going to be able to. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. It depends on what lands and what colors you're in.
I might be fine to have a 4/4 Angel Flyer to give you a land that you cannot then activate.
Yep, but that one is going to give me a creature too.
That one particularly, but it might give you, a 1/1 token, like we were saying.
Yeah.
It might still be fine.
Well, yeah, token. Yeah, agreed.
And if you're playing this, you're probably not going to be able to activate the Gruul land or anything else. So, that seems pretty fringe.
That's fair.
The other side, guys, target player loses 3 life unless they sacrifice a non-land permanent or discard a card. And then you can pay 4 to untap it and do it again. Good job. So that's really cool and constructed because one side fuels the other, right? You play the god and then you play this and then you make them discard and then you steal all those cards. Very constructed-y. I like this card a ton. I don't know. I'm never casting it for the lantern side unless I'm in the more aggressive deck and they have now stabilized, but I'm still in the lead but can't push through the damage, which, might happen. But tap, target player loses 3 life unless they sacrifice a non-land permanent. It's going to do one of 2 things. It is going to whittle down their hand and their board until I can push through the damage, or they will sacrifice one thing, which will make my more aggressive deck, that might make the difference for me to push it in on the ground, right?
Yeah, or just get 2 of them and then you'll play both sides.
I'm not that greedy and limited. But yeah, I think there actually might be some situations where you can't finish your opponent off, and having a 4/5 on the board, although it is menace, that might not push it through on its own, but being able to, do this, let's say, one time the turn you play it, and then 2 times the next turn, that could be enough sacrifice, options to kind of unclog the board. Possibly.
Yeah, there are definitely spots where you're aggressive and ahead, and they've stabilized, just like you said, where the backside might actually be better.
And they might have no cards in hand, making it very difficult for them to deal with this and decide what things to get rid of.
Yep.
What do you give this?
I think this is a 4/5.
I think so too. It's got upside. That's weird because it has upside based on what your opponent has in their deck as well. The upside also for if you have any sacrifice or discard spells. If you're running 2 of the rat elves, then this card gets much better. If you're running the 4-drop mind rot, this gets better. But again, you want to be careful putting too many of those kinds of cards in your deck, just because you don't want to be drawing all of those and none of these, and then have this weird situation where you just don't have a good average of creatures to spells.
Yep, agreed.
We are almost done with the entire set review, guys. This one's a bit longer. Valky, right. God of Lies. Go ahead.
Yep, Valky, God of Lies is a 2-mana 2/1 legendary creature god. When Valky enters the battlefield, each opponent reveals their hand. For each opponent, exile a creature card they revealed this way until Valky leaves the battlefield. And you can pay X to choose a creature card exiled with Valky with converted mana cost X, and it becomes a copy of that. So they got to show you your hand, you get rid of a creature, and then you can pay X, pay that creature's mana cost to turn this into that creature. They do get the creature back if Valky dies, or leaves the battlefield in any way. So it's interesting. It's a cheap god. It's the cheapest god we've seen. It's 2-mana 2/1, which is
fine.
Below impact what we've seen, but you get to remove their best creature from their hand, at least temporarily, kind of like a Kite Sail Freebooter type card.
Yep.
And then you can turn this as soon as turn 3. If they had a 3-drop you want to make this a copy of, you can do that, or just later in the game you can make a 5-drop with this. So I like that. Now again, this is the type of card that would go way down, like if you draw it in the late game normally, because they might not have something you want to exile. But like all the other gods, it's got a backside.
And its backside is a planeswalker.
Yep. It's Tybalt, Cosmic Imposter. Tybalt is back. He is a 7-mana planeswalker, 5 black red, comes into play with loyalty 5. As with a static ability, or I guess that's actually a triggered ability. As Tybalt enters the battlefield, you get an emblem that says you may play cards exiled with Tybalt Cosmic Imposter, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast those spells. +2, exile the top card of each player's library. -3, exile target artifact or creature. -8, exile all cards from all graveyards. Add red, red, red. So removes the top, gets 2 cards with its +2 off one of off the top of each player's deck. Exiles a dangerous artifact or creature. Exiles everything in the yard, and everything that he's exiled, you can cast.
Yeah, now you can't cast it once he leaves the battlefield, so you need to make sure you're in a situation where you're not far behind and you'll be able to... Oh no, it's an emblem. Never mind.
It's an emblem.
It's an
you
emblem.
Can, in fact.
I was thinking of it like one of the static abilities like the other planeswalkers that we saw from whatever the set was where planeswalkers had abilities.
Yeah. Yep.
Opponents can't cast instants on your turn, stuff like that.
Yeah, yep.
So I was thinking of it more of like a static ability, but yeah, no, that's definitely interesting. It's going to come down and guarantee you basically 2 cards off the top of the deck that you can cast later. So it effectively is a draw 2 at its base. I mean, it's expensive, right? 7 mana is very, very high. If you're activating this more than 1 turn, it's a ton of value. If you're activating it for 1 turn, it's okay-ish value. One thing I will say, this is our first modal double colored card. Don't be afraid to just play this for black. Like, I can't see why you wouldn't want to splash a red, hypothetically, if you were in black-blue, open this pack 3. I would definitely do my damnedest to try to make a splash happen, but if you feel uncomfortable doing that, or you have no fixing and don't think it's worth it for whatever reason, I'm still definitely playing this as a 2-drop black card, right? That's what it is at its worst.
Yeah, and it's the fact that it's a good early drop, it's a good late drop on its backside. Even if it only lives 1 turn, cause the Tybalt side, you -3 it and get rid of their biggest threat, and you can play that at any point in the rest of the game, and you've already got 7 mana to cast this card, so you could probably play whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think they might not have something depending or whatever. No. I think at its worst, it's draw 2 blanks that you can cast at any time. If you're removing any large creature and then recasting it, that's huge value too, because that's an O for 1, right?
Yep, and also you may play cards, so you can play lands that get exiled. It's not you may cast cards.
Yep. That is something a lot of people mess up, the difference between play and cast on exiled cards, because some cards do make that distinction. So I've seen people try to cast spells or cast lands that they have exiled, which they cannot, and I've seen players not play lands that they have exiled because they're used to not being able to.
Yeah, now the interesting thing in paper, this won't be an issue on Arena, but in paper is, right, this emblem only allows you to play cards that you exiled with Tybalt. So like if I know this is more of a constructed thing, but if you had both of these cards you exiled with Valky on the front, you cannot play with using Tybalt's emblem. Or if you exiled it with the common black removal spell.
Yeah, so if you're in paper, you might get those 2 exile piles mixed up, which is a bit weird, and there could be some funky judge calls and a lot of it has to do with your opponent too. So like if I exile something with the spell and then play Tybalt and exile 2 cards, and my opponent shuffles those together, then like that's a really weird board state. I would recommend in paper, whatever you exile with him, try to put under your card, the same way you would like an O-ring or something.
Yep, absolutely. Either that or mark it with some kind of counter or something, because this set could have a number of different exile piles. Between that, foretells go to exile.
That's true.
Just regular cards that get exiled.
The foretell should be a little easier because they're kind of face down, right?
Yep, it should be easier.
Versus like a lot of people do their exile face up still, but like 90 degrees or 180 or whatever. No, 90 degrees. Yeah. In comparison, so it's probably fine.
Yeah, one other again, this is more of a constructed thing because you're not going to have 2 Tybalts in limited, but Tybalt, I believe, does care about which Tybalt exiled it. Like
interesting.
If you exiled it with this card, if you play a second Tybalt and exile other ones, you get it. It's basically a different emblem, effectively.
Well, you would end up with 2 emblems, but technically it wouldn't matter because there's no way to remove the first one, right?
Yes, but you can't play those first cards anymore. Is kind of the weird.
Why not?
Oh.
It replaces the other emblem? You don't get them both?
Hang on.
I would think you would just have 2 of the same emblem, and you'd be able to cast them both.
Maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, I guess you would have both emblems out. So yeah, never mind.
So technically you're right in that they care, but you would just be activating a different emblem, so it should never really come up unless and which is this actually, since they've came out with emblems, this is something I thought would be really cool, is to have something fringe that does interact with emblems. I think that would be a really cool aspect to add to the Planeswalker system, because emblems seem overpowered. So it just, I mean, they're rare to get off, but it would make things really interesting if you could then negate it somehow.
I was always okay with that when the emblems were always like a function just of the ultimate, like you had to do work to get them. But now that like sometimes they come in enter the battlefield.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't seem. I agree. I feel like it, and I'm sure we will get it at some point.
Enchant target player. Enchant target player cannot have emblems or something. Yeah. All right. So what? This he's a little weird. He's a bit expensive for this Valky God of Lies. What are we thinking score wise?
I think it's a 5. I think both sides can theoretically win the game. I mean, Tybalt's more likely to, but it costs a lot more. But it's good at the beginning of the game. It's good like middle of the game. It's good at the end of the game. Like there's just no point where this card is bad, really. I guess unless you're playing against the hyper aggressive deck and you're way behind.
I feel like I'm greedy. I feel like in constructed you'd want to you could play Valky, but I feel like in limited I'm greedy and I'm almost always going to try to cast this for Tybalt, unless I'm desperate for creatures and getting behind on the board. If I'm sliding backwards, then sure, you gotta do what you gotta do. But for the most part, this is going to be one of the modals that I'm pretty hesitant to cast early if I can avoid it. Valky's not going to win you the game necessarily, but I do believe that that Tybalt will. All right. Urgi?
Sure.
Urgi. God of Storytelling. We have a 3-mana 3/3. Sounds good. Whenever you cast a spell, add a red. Until end of turn, you don't lose those mana at ends as an end step phase. And so so anything you cast first main phase you can then keep. You don't lose during in between combat step there. Creatures you control can boast twice during each turn rather than once. So there's a fair amount of boast. I mean, boast is a bit expensive, so I would be careful about trying to overdraft boast creatures for this. Urgi, says Piper. What are you thinking about this card?
This is the kind of the first one of these we've seen that's feels to be more of a build around. I mean, don't be wrong, 3-mana 3/3 with some decent ability to generate mana is fine on its own. But if you want to get that second ability to mean anything, you have to have a decent handful of quality boast creatures, not just quantity.
I agree with that. And a lot of the quality boast creatures are so expensive that you can't really afford to activate them twice.
Yeah, you're gonna want something like I forget the name of it, but the boast that you can pay 2 to make a 1/1. Or you can double activate the one that taps things down for 2 mana. In a very, very aggressive red-white deck.
The tap one will be pretty good with this. But any of the other ones that I really liked, some of them had pretty high boast cost. Even the one that's what was the one that gives your team +1/+1?
It only costs 2.
That was 2 to boast?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that would be pretty good.
Or the one that gives it a +1/+1 counter is also 2 mana.
Okay. Yeah, those are going to be pretty good with this card for sure. I like the mana ability quite a bit. It's going to leave a lot of room for combat tricks. allows you to progress the board, so you're playing spells. I will say that you might want to cast your creature spells pre-combat sometimes, just to like add that extra mana, so that way if you do have combat tricks, you don't, you know, I guess there's no downside to doing the combat trick first, is there?
No.
For some reason I was thinking creature spell, but it's not. It's anything. So yeah, it doesn't really matter. It's going to make your more aggressive decks more aggressive, but I don't know that it's winning the game on its own necessarily.
Oh, it needs some help. I'm skimming through some of the other boast creatures. There are some good options. You've got the one that you can pay 1 to exile the top card of your library, and then you can play it. So now you get 2 shots at something good, or the one that pays 2 to ping something. Now you can pay 2 to ping something twice, or pay 2 twice. And of course, clearly what we're going to be doing with this card is paying 5 to make a dragon with the boast, and then you only have to pay 4 the second time because now you have a dragon.
Yeah, 9 mana. Let's go. I want to make a dragon. All right, so the flip side of this, guys, is the Horn of Bounty. Discard a card, exile the top 2 cards from your library. You may play those cards this turn. So it's a nice mechanic to let you pitch lands that you're drawing late game. I'm wondering if potentially this is just going to be played early as a 3-drop, with or without the ability, and then once you've got plenty of mana, the first ability is kind of negated. Boast may or may not be relevant depending on the, you know, the quality or strength of the boast in your deck. And then late game, you might just be better off fueling up your hand by discarding and drawing. Basically, draw 2 every turn. Might be the better option.
Yeah, I think that's exactly how this card's going to play out. You'll play the 3-drop on 3, and try to generate some mana with it. If you've got boast in your deck and a decent amount of it, then maybe you're still going to play the 3-drop. But yeah, a lot of your average decks, once you get later in the game, you're just dropping this as an artifact and getting to turn all your lands into 2 shots at good cards.
Yeah, you might even want to turn any of your weaker cards into two blank cards as well.
Agreed.
Because worst case scenario, you're hitting a land and a blank card, you know, an equally bad card at worst. So, I mean, and then maybe potentially 2 good cards or 2 whatever removal spell. And I feel like this is going to be very good in the cheap Boros deck. And at that point, when your deck is that cheap, I'm pretty happy to just play this for 5 and draw 2 cards a turn. Now, I will say that's 3 cards a turn, so you might be milling yourself really quickly. So just be a little hesitant and make sure you can end the game before you start doing that.
Yep, agreed. But I think this card's good. Another one of these cards that the modal is good early, good late, which is kind of exactly what you want from a modal spell.
Yeah, I think this one is a bit interesting in that most of the ones we've seen are what we think better on one side just a huge amount of the time, versus this being like very where in the game you are dependent.
Where in the game you are, and I think it's the first one of these that really has a significant build around component on the front side. All the others are they're just good. This is good, but you need to have some boast creatures to really make it shine.
Yeah. I feel like the other ones, every side was like, I hope I can cast it for this side, but in this situation I might need this, but I hope I don't need to. This one, I mean, I'm fine with either, so it doesn't really matter when in the game you draw this. And that's actually both nice and also, it's not as powerful, but, you don't have the same restrictions, so I do like that. I'm giving this a 3-5. I don't think that either side is quite as impactful as I would like it to be for anything higher than that.
Agreed. 3-5 sounds right. Yeah, good on both sides, but need some work to win the game.
Or Elf, God of Fury. It is a 5/4 trampler for 4. Seems like good stats. Whenever a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls is dealt excess non-combat damage, it deals damage equal to the excess amount to any target other permanent. That's to any target other than that permanent. Sorry. Really, really tiny lettering on this computer. So it's got like a trample for spells, essentially. And it says non-combat, so it's going to count fights as well.
Yeah. This is interesting kind of card. Pretty limiting that ability, but it's nice to, if you're burning something for 4 and it's a X2, you have 2 more. You can turn a single spell into a 2-for-1, potentially get 2/2/2s for a single 4 damage burn spell.
There's also that giant removal spell that if you have giants, it costs 2 mana at instant speed for 6 damage.
Yep.
And it's a common? Jiminy Christmas, I can't wait to draft this and then just draft giants and that thing. Holy smokes, that's going to be insane.
Yeah, or you got the giant that when it dies, it deals, non-combat damage, deals 7 damage to a random creature. So if you wanted to kill a 6/6, but now you hit like their X1, well, you still get their 6/6 because you've got 6 excess damage.
You might also consider drafting the fight spells a little bit higher, right? There's 2 fight spells in green.
Yep.
So that'll make your big fat fatties hurt a hell of a lot more. You fight this on a 2/2 and you get to then trample over the rest of the damage and put that onto something else that might have potentially killed this, because the other one won't deal, you're not getting to cast the fight cards twice, you're just trampling over.
Yep, it also allows you to turn excess damage on spells that can't target players to now go face. So like all the 6 damage one that can only target creature or planeswalker, it allows you to actually turn that into a burn spell to deal damage directly to your opponent for some of the damage.
Yeah, any target other than that permanent. So let's say hypothetically they've got a 5/5 and a 1/1 and they're at 5. You don't kill the 5/5, you kill the 1.
Exactly.
That's cute. I can't wait to kill somebody that way.
Yeah. Why are they targeting my 1/1? Oh, I'm dead.
Oh, that makes sense. Checks out.
Yeah.
All right. So score-wise, I mean, it's going to be very dependent upon how many non-combat damage you can provide. Sometimes you have none. If you're in the Is It deck and you don't have, some of my red decks have 1, sometimes 0 burn spells. And the red burn in this set is very good. I think this is one of the better ones that we've seen in a little while. So it's going to be highly drafted and hard to get.
Yeah, but if that's the case, right, you've still got a 4 mana 5/4
with trample, at its worst,
or the back half of this card,
which is Toralf's Hammer, 2 mana to cast, 2 mana to equip, and it has 2 mana. Unattach the hammer, it deals 3 damage to any target, and then you return it to its owner's hand. Equipped creature also gets +3/+0, so it makes it huge, and it gives it a little reach if you still can't manage to get over the defenses, and it's cheap to recast and do some stuff. So I do like this.
Yeah. The equipment's a good mana sink. It is expensive in the sense that it's 6 mana to activate that ability, right? 2 to play, 2 to equip, and then 2 to activate the unattach.
Yeah.
But you can do that over time. You can do that, the unattached part at instant speed, as opposed to the other 2. I don't love the fact that the bonus, the +3/+0, is only good on legendary creatures.
That is interesting. That's going to be way less relevant in limited.
Yeah. But that being said, that this is a fine, card option to have if the front half is no good, or you just need, some reach, repetitive reach at that.
Someone said Thor's hammer. Yeah, it's Thoralf's.
Thoralf's, and he throws it, and it comes back to him.
But it's Thoralf's because Thor is, I'm sure, copyrighted.
Exactly.
I think both of these cards seem good. The hammer seems a tad bit more constructed-y to me than the God of Fury here. This side seems more like a build-around. It seems less powerful on its own in comparison to any of the other legendary or mythic gods. Like, if you don't have other cards to support him, he's not as good, right? I mean, he's a 4 mana 5/4 trampler, which is great, but that's not as good, I think, as some of the other ones.
I agree. I think this is the weakest of the mythic gods we've seen so far.
Agreed. On its own.
Base.
Yeah. Now, if you've got the support and your deck is jamming with some really good burn spells, this is going to go up a lot. and then he can box with the other gods. But by himself, I don't think he's putting in the work.
Yeah, no, I do like the fact that you could play this like the blue mythic god. You can just drop this on turn 2 and have sort of 3 damage just kind of sitting on the battlefield waiting for a chance to use it, and then you still get it back with a chance to play it for its front side as well.
Yeah.
So it's nice that you can kind of get both halves, when you got some spare mana, but that is a very expensive lightning bolt.
It is. I kind of think that I still like this better than the blue one, but I know you were very high on the blue one.
Yeah, I don't like it quite as much as the blue one, but I think it's good. All these cards are good. We haven't seen any that you wouldn't be thrilled to play.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not, by no means have any of these arguments for whether or not it is better than something else mean that it is not amazing, and I'm happy to run it in all of my decks.
Yep.
These are just like, incremental. And this is actually why a lot of people on the YouTube videos were saying, like, why didn't you go over the red god in this, like, color? And that's because I wanted to compare them side by side, because I feel like after having all of the knowledge from all of the colors and what each color brings individually and how the gods will then fit into it, it's kind of nice to compare them side by side. But I mean, I think they're all powerful. It doesn't even matter what. It's not like I'm ever going to be like, which god should I play? The answer is all of them.
Yeah, especially the mythic ones. There's none of these if you're in that color you're not first picking.
Absolutely. So our arguments are basically irrelevant. Just play them. Which one is better it does not matter. They're all excellent and wonderful to play. So I think like this feels a little bit more constructed-y, but if you happen to be one of only 2 red players and they're on the other side of the table, you could get hooked up with some really good red, and then this card just becomes infinitely better. But on its face, I'm more in the 4 range. I don't think it's going to put in the work on its own.
Yeah, I agree. Right in that same range. Doesn't take much to make it better, though. Couple good burn spells or fight spells.
Yeah, and honestly, not much, just because I do think it'll do a lot of work.
Yep.
All right, we have God of the Tree. It is a 1/4 vigilance for 3. It adds a mana of any color, so it fixes very nicely. Other legendary creatures you control have vigilance and also add mana. We have some Wooburg casting cost for the Prismatic Bridge. Funny. At the beginning of your upkeep, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature or a planeswalker card. Put the rest, or put that card onto the battlefield and put the rest on the bottom. Okay, so I mean, yeah, that's cute if you get it out in constructed. Not really limited.
Yeah.
Now that said, I think that the other legendary creature mana dork side is irrelevant, but I'm probably still playing a 1/4 vigilance that taps for any color fixing.
Yeah, this is the first one of these that is probably not an instant first pick. The backside is just not really relevant for limited, and the front side is certainly good and a card you'd be happy to have, but I can think of things I'd take over a 3 mana 1/4 mana dork.
Yeah, 3 mana 1/4 mana dork with vigilance, but it does fix. A lot of them are either creature only or green. I would say that I would still take this moderately highly, but again, not over premium removal or over some of the like best uncommon creatures. But I still think this is going to be first picked in most of the decks or most of the packs that we open.
Yeah, green does tend to take mana dorks highly. You tend to prefer them to be 1 or 2 mana, not 3, but it does have vigilance, which is nice. Although a 1/4 vigilance isn't as relevant because attacking for 1 isn't that exciting.
I just love that a lot of the foretell cards remove double pips and all of the gods. Picking this early, like I said, in lieu of like a premium black removal, is going to allow you to be way more greedy in what you choose later on.
Yeah. I did think, though, pick one, I'm taking that black removal spell over this.
Oh, absolutely. That's I said
okay.
in lieu
Aside,
of...
Got it.
Yeah, so if there is no premium removal spell, and then maybe there's probably how many uncommon bomb creatures are better than this. Like, how many premium removal spells? 2 in black, 2 in red we're probably taking over this.
Yeah, probably. That sounds right.
And then how many creatures are better than this? Like,
Yeah, not at rare, not a ton.
yeah, exactly. That so there's probably only like 4 removal spells and a cycle or 2 cycles of creatures that we take over this. So I mean, you're probably at least in half the packs you open this, you're going to be taking this first.
Yeah, I think I'm maybe it's just skewed because we're looking at all these rares and mythics next to each other, and it's compared to the other mythic gods, it's pretty disappointing.
It's very disappointing. But this isn't a paper pack. Most likely,
Yep.
you're playing on Arena, so you're not going to be able to get another rare slot. So
Agreed.
we're not comparing it to the other gods. We're comparing it to uncommons.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
And it's going to be better than all of them, most likely. Most. I definitely take a removal spell over it, but I like a big mana dork. Bridge unplayable. Don't play the other side. What are we rating this? Like a 3?
Yeah, I'd say a 3.
If it wasn't double green pip, I'd be much happier. Again, so it allows me to splash whatever I want. But I think it's just a good 3-drop that's going to stonewall the deck and make some good manas. God of Winter. This was Kibler's preview card. Attacks. Whenever it attacks, untap each snow permanent you control to 3/3 for 3. That seems pretty nice.
Yeah.
Cast your creatures pre-combat with your snowlands and then untap them and get a second step.
Yep, it has pseudo vigilance because it'll untap itself.
Yep, it doesn't say each other, so that's important. The other side is his staff. It is 3 mana, colorless blue-black. Tap, you may play target snow permanent card from your graveyard this turn. If you do, it enters the battlefield tapped. That's a lot of snow recursion. I do like that. Late game, I think that the staff is going to be a lot better than the god himself. The god himself is cute, but he's still a 3/3 for 3 that's easily blocked, and the untapping may or may not be relevant, depending on how many snow permanents you have in your deck.
Agreed. I think the backside of this card has much more potential, much more power. Now, granted, it's much tougher to cast. And you're looking at between the two sides, 3 colors. Now they are the snow colors, so that makes sense. Green, blue, and black are the colors where snow is showing up in the set. But yeah, it's good.
I was just saying now keeping that in mind, both sides are stronger than what you're going to find in those slots anywhere else. Yeah. So if you're only running, just green, don't be afraid to play him. Or if you are like, I'm running blue-black and I don't want to splash the green because I can't support it, that's fine. I'm still happy to run this in my snow decks without one of the sides. Both sides are individually strong enough to play regardless.
Agreed, although the blue-black side does require you to be blue-black and fairly relatively heavy snow. Green side you can play in any green deck. It's just a 3 mana. It's just a 3 mana 3/3.
Yes,
with vigilance.
I assumed that we're putting these in the snow decks, either one, because these are the snow colors.
Agreed. I just mean you can play the front side in red green. Just as a 3 mana 3/3.
Yeah, but then it's just a 2.
It's a little better than that, I think. 3 mana 3/3 basically with vigilance.
Yeah, I guess the vigilance is okay too. If it's not untapping anything else, you're right. If it's a 3 mana 3/3 with vigilance, which is fine. It's a bit better than a 2.
Yeah. But yeah, both you're right. Both in general, assuming you're playing snow, both of these cards are worth playing on their own. You do not have to be all 3 colors to play this
card. Most decks are mediocre, happy to have it, or not happy to have it at all. I think if you're in green, you're happy to have the god. If you're not in green, you're not happy to have the staff at all. If you're not in snow, so it's basically a 2 on its own. If you're in the snow deck, I like the staff side a fair amount more. I think that it's like a 4.
Yeah, I can buy both of those.
Now the quality of this card again goes up based on the quality of your snow permanents.
Yep. And if you have some sort of way to get cards into your graveyard for the back half as well. But we've seen the Dimir Sacrifice Land mills. We've seen a couple things that support that. So
yeah, or you're just getting back your creatures that are dead.
Yep.
Which I'm pretty happy to do. If it hits 2 or 3 creatures, that's good.
You've gotten good value then.
I think this is maybe our last modal according to my doc here.
Close. We've got 4 more lands,
Oh, okay.
but they're rare. They're the rare pathway cycle. The rest of that we've seen before.
Tiny text, take it away.
Yep. Kolvori, God of Kinship. This is a 4-mana 2/4, 2 green for a legendary creature god. As long as you control 3 or more legendary creatures, Kolvori gets +4/+2 and has vigilance, so becomes a 6/6 vigilance. Pay 1 and a green and tap it. Look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal a legendary creature card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So it does count itself, so you need 2 other legends. And we're seeing a reasonable amount of legends, but still not a that's not going to be easy to come across.
Certainly not.
I'm just out of curiosity, I'm scrolling through green, since this is a green card, and I see outside of the modal cards,
I'm scrolling through red.
there are 3 green legends that are not modals, one of which is a mythic, and one of which is a rare, and one is an uncommon.
And then red has 1 rare so far. 2 rares. It looks like just 2 rares in red. So, I mean, there are some, but they're both, they're all basically rare.
Yeah, this is not Dominaria where they were all over the place at uncommon.
Yeah, this requires you to not just have this rare. It requires you to essentially have 2 other rares and then have them in play. I don't know about you, but I'm lucky if my deck has a rare in it, let alone 3 rares all on the battlefield.
I will say all of the... Go for it.
If you are having 3 rares on the battlefield, you were probably winning anyway.
Agreed. I will say that all of the signpost uncommon multicolor cards are all legendary creatures.
Okay.
And uncommon, so that does help.
That certainly helps.
But it's still going to be difficult to get that. And at the same time, that's going to make the second ability, where you're hoping to hit legendaries off the top of your deck, also difficult to hit.
Yeah, I mean, if it's extra mana and you've got 2 in your deck,
sure.
It's, know...
Why not?
You're basically just cycling through to eventually get that, that value. Whether or not you think you're going to hit it often is one thing, but...
And to note for everybody, changelings, despite being all creature types, they are not legendary. They do not get the super type legendary.
Yeah, so that counts for snow and for legendary, stuff like that.
Yep. The backside of this card is a legendary artifact, the Ringheart Crest. It is 1 and a green, and as it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type. You can tap it to add green and spend this mana only to cast a creature spell of that type or a legendary creature. So it's like a conditional mana rock that only adds green. I'm not a huge fan of this card.
Yeah, it's a 2/4 that helps you dig for your legendaries. If I have like 3 other legendaries, then I'm pretty happy to have it in my deck. It's kind of expensive to cast with two green, but I think at that point it's fine to help me dig for them. It cycles through the deck for them. And then the other side is very exciting.
Yeah, I can't imagine Unlimited really ever playing the backside of this card, because if you have enough legends, you're going to want to play the front. And maybe in the most tribal of like elf decks, maybe you could play this, but those elf cards are kind of cheap, so you probably don't need the mana that much. Yeah, I think this is like a 2/5.
Yeah, I agree with that. It is a 2/5 on its, because it's a fine body, but whether or not it's going to get any value for the legendary side is so minimal. And like I said, even if you have a couple, that's great. I'm happy to run it, but it's not going to hit enough times for it to actually get any more value than what it's providing on its face.
Yeah, I mean, a 4-mana 2/4 with no abilities is like a 1.5 for a 2. So this does have some upsides, and needing 2 more legendaries, if you can pick those up, that's not impossible, but it's not going to hit that often. Now the payoff is huge; it becomes a 6/6 vigilance.
Yes,
you've got it, but it's not going to happen often. The impact it has is outweighed by the vast majority of the times where it doesn't happen.
I will say, if you happen to have 6 legendary creatures for whatever reason in your deck, then yeah, this card's great.
Oh, absolutely. This card is fantastic.
But If you do, you'll probably win anyway, even if this is a 2-4.
Agreed.
All right, 2-5. Moving on, guys. We have the last couple of just modal lands. They're actually just very straightforward. We can rate them. You're always taking them because they're dual lands for splashing purposes. They have no downside to them. So we have got green, blue, black, red, black, green, white, blue, blue, white, and that's it. So take it as highly as you would take, a little higher. Obviously, they don't come into play tapped, but a dual land, there's no downside to having them, but I would definitely rather, a decent creature, decent removal. I'm not comparing it side by side with like a bomb by any means, the best of the best in those formats, but I think usually my dual lands I'm picking in the middle of the pack. What do you think?
Yeah, you're looking in the middle of the pack if you don't have any solid playables. I mean, these obviously go up in value if you're trying to play 3 or 4 colors, or you have some awkward mana requirements. But yeah, these are your typical ratings for dual lands in most sets, especially the rare ones, are between that 2.5 to 3 range.
Yeah. Now, there's no reason not to rate them highly because they're great to have.
Yep.
The question is whether or not they're going to give you enough value in your deck to justify taking it over a creature that's a 3.
Yeah, these are cards you are absolutely never cutting as long as they're in your both colors, right? There's absolutely no reason to. It's just exactly where do you rate them in the pick order in a draft over a solid playable?
Like, I think I would definitely take a creature that's a 3 over a land, but the land is definitely like a 3 because you're never cutting it. They're great to have. They're flexible. They do all these things. But again, I'd rather just have like the solid consistency in my deck because your land base could just work out fine. And if you build a good deck, it does most of the time. So I don't want to rate it poorly because you don't need it. But also keep in mind that this 3 doesn't necessarily mean you should take it over a removal spell that's a 3.
Agreed. And, unlike a lot of the other common and some of the uncommon lands, they are not snowlands.
Yes, correct.
So they do not produce snow mana.
They do have really pretty art, though.
They do. This is the end of the cycle that we saw begin recently with 6 of these in, was it Zendikar Rising? These are the 4 that were not printed in that set.
Yes, correct. So anyway, I think, we rated the come into the play tapped lands at like a 2-5 to pick up as soon as you can. But again, you're not picking this up over playables, even though they're rated very highly. You're typically just trying to get them when you can.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, guys, I think that is the end of our set review. So, Yanks, thank you so much for joining us for all of this. I mean, this was a ton of hours, far more than ever before. Today is 2.5 almost. Yeah, so it took us 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.5 hours, 10 hours.
Yeah, I think these run a little longer when Wizards tricks us and gives us all these modal cards that you really have to analyze 2 cards for the price of 1.
Yes.
And they extend a little longer.
And is it just me, or did this set have a lot more text in it than most?
These were very long. I know some other people that do their set reviews that have done this, set after set after set, have been saying that, this is the first time I ever had to break this up into 2 sessions, stuff like that, because there was just a lot going on in a lot of these cards.
Yeah, the mechanics are very unique. We have a couple of things we've never seen before. The modals, we're combining a bunch of other mechanics that we've seen in very new and unique ways, and the set was just very flavorful. I feel like they put a lot of work into making it. You have the god of death and his throne, and like together they make this thing that is very cool, but again, very hard to analyze. So thank you again so much for joining us. For those of you guys on YouTube, this is Yanks. He doesn't stream or anything, but if you are ever around, he's on our channel all the time, and I'm sure you'll see him come around for some of our other videos. Thank you so much again for guest starring.
Absolutely, anytime.
All right. Thank you guys again so much for watching. That's the end of our set review. Down below in the comments, I will link the articles for this. All of this is written down in text. I kind of go over the videos and write a short little preview. Also, guys, I'm going to give you guys the link for untapped.gg. All of these scores are post it up on the overlay for the app. If you download the app and you're drafting on MTG Arena and you open the app, it'll come up with the overlay on top of your cards that show you guys all of my scores. And if you hover over the card, it'll also pop up the little text bubble, and it'll tell you what I think about it, just to kind of help make drafting a little easier for you if you liked these scores and how we rated them. And that's it. This video is really freaking long, so I'm gonna go ahead and end it. Have a good night, guys. Be safe. Love you. I'd like to give a special thank you to those of you who have signed up for our Patreon. Without you guys, none of this would be possible. This content is also sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. and KMC Sleeves. If you guys enjoyed the content, consider checking out the links below and using our discount codes. Thank you guys again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.